Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai, and a warm welcome to our council meeting of Wednesday, the 1st of May 2024. Before we get into our order of business, if I could ask the Deputy Mayor to open with karakia.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship, o tira, tēnā koutou katoa. Nice to see everyone. Nō reira me tū tātou, me mahi tō tātou karakia. Tū tawa mai I runga, tū tawa mai I raro, tū tawa mai I roto, tū tawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Come forth from above, below, within, and from within the environment, vitality and well-being for all. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Warm welcome to everybody here today. There's a few in the gallery and also a number online. Just before, I'll just do the housekeeping before we get into things, but obviously the meeting's been live streamed on our council's YouTube channel. In terms of health and safety and fire and emergency, look, in the unlikely event of an emergency, if you could please exit through the green signs as you entered or where they are signposted. We evacuate to the assembly area next to the clock tower in the square Te Maraahine. In terms of health and safety, it is a non-smoking facility. And again, unlikely event of needing a defibrillator, that is located on the foyer entrance in the ground floor. And any instances or near misses, please just report those to our committee administration. If I could just ask speakers perhaps just to mention their name and to officers perhaps in the first instance, name and title. And just remind everybody that, look, there's a couple of contentious issues here today, so please, if we can keep comments respectful in all ways. And we have a number of councillors, one councillor online, acknowledge Councillor Harper is online. So we'll go through to apologies, and receive apologies from Councillor Bowen, early departure on council business. We have Councillor Naylor and Councillor Mickelard for early departure and arrival, which we can probably take Councillor Dennison out of that now. I'm happy to move those, and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. If there's no comments, we will vote, please. Are 16 votes for and none against. Moving through to number 3 on our order paper is notification of any additional items. There's nothing. I haven't been notified of anything additional as of this morning, and there's nothing from the floor. So we'll move through to declarations of interest and Councillor Harper, would you like to speak, please, to that?
Just item 26. I'll just declare an interest in that, please.
Great, thank you. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would also like to declare an interest on part 2, item number 25, 24 on 5.
Okay.
24 it is, sorry. And then I'm going to take further advice on item 16 before we deliberate. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Fitzgerald.
Just declaring an interest in item 6.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Mickelard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to declare an interest on item 26.
Okay. I've started something. Councillor Johnson.
Just a question, Mr. Mayor. I just want to be sure that members are clear whether they're declaring an interest or a conflict, particularly on item 16. Yep. So I'll just raise that.
Yep, that's a personal responsibility, but that's noted. Okay, All right. Thank you. All right, we now come to public comment, and we have a number of people wishing to make public comment, and thank you for coming in or being on Teams. And to our first is Regan Orr, the principal on secondment from Central Normal School. And Regan, you've got 3 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Morena koutou, ngā mihi koutou, and thank you for the Mayor for allowing me to speak this morning and to councillors for allowing me to speak. I understand you have my submission that has been passed on to you that I had to table for this meeting. I'd just like to raise a couple of key points around it with regards to the cycle lane that's been put into Featherston Street. I just want councillors to know that the school and myself have always been vehemently opposed to the cycle lane putting along Featherston Street. I had numerous meetings with council staff over 2022 and 2023 expressing the dissatisfaction from the school to say that we did not want the cycle lane put into place. We were told repeatedly that because it was through Waka Kotahi funding that the cycle lane would proceed, and I just don't know if the health and safety of our 500 children were taken into account when the cycle lane was installed. I think the biggest thing for us is that our children don't have the cognizant ability to actually keep themselves safe when they exit school grounds, and to have the complication of a cycle lane in front of it has actually not been considered for our students. I also do believe that with the installation of the cycle lane, you've actually pushed the majority of the traffic around our two other side streets, especially Aroha Street, which has become heavily congested. The road crossing on Featherston Street now, the poles that are supposed to be coming from council have not come through. They've been near misses for our students when the signs have gone out. I also would just like to say that I think there's been a diminished sense of community for our school. Our school is no longer accessible from Featherston Street, which is where the main entrance for our school is. The cycle lane is now in place of that. My understanding is that bollards be installed along there too, which also would prevent anyone from coming anywhere near the front of our school. You would know we need to keep the fences closed and locked to maintain the safety of our students in the school grounds, and so therefore with all this that's now put into place on Featherston Street, our community can no longer access our school. And I think when our children actually have to have first aid or they're injured, they can no longer park outside our school to instantly come into school to actually access their child. I do think also, you know, our school is your city's oldest school, and now you've actually taken a community sense of pride away from that, where they cannot access their school any longer. Yes, they can go to the side streets, but actually our entrance and our tomokanga, our Māori welcome into our kura, is from Featherston Street. That has now been removed from actually our school. But I would just like to reiterate for my last point, can you please consider the safety of 500 children with regards to this? I do know the brief was taken from the length of Featherston Street and it had to be shortened. That was then shortened to just outside our school. So I just want to consider, please, can you think of 500 children in terms of safety for access and enter our school and to get to where they need to be with their parents rather than actually what's been given now? Thank you.
Thank you, Regan. Perfect timing. So, unfortunately, we've got a number of councillors, we've got a number of speakers today. So, look, thank you, Regan. We've got your letter, and we will be taking everything into account as we move through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our second speaker of 5 this morning, or 7 actually, is James Irwin. So I invite you up, James, from Palmerston or Streets Ahead. Welcome, James. Now, if you just push the button there, that'll give you the microphone. Yeah, well done.
Okay.
You're on.
Good. Kia ora koutou. Your Worship, the Mayor and Councillors, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Just pull your speaker. Yeah, that's it. Good.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name's James Irwin. I'm a dad in Palmerston North to kids that go to school. I work as a gastroenterologist at the hospital, and I spend a bit of time coaching football around town. And I'm here representing Palmerston North Streets Ahead, which is our community group which advocates for pedestrians, cyclists, those with disability, public transport users, making the city as pleasant as possible for them to get around. So this is about the Featherston Street upgrade, and we've made a written submission. I'm not going to go through all of the points to that. I'd rather just try to frame the situation and point in time that we find ourselves in right now. There's a bit of opposition coming up, as always happens, and yeah, hopefully this framing will help set the debate. So I arrived in Palmerston North 10 years ago, and I've always been impressed with the vision that our council has for the city, and it's been published and verbalised repeatedly, and from a transport point of view, that's always been that it's going to be a pleasant and safe place for people to get around on foot, on cycle, on scooters, on buses, if they have disability. And as we get around, we interact with the environment we pass through, we interact with each other, and it's a place where kids can become independent and resilient because they're not dependent on their parents to get them from A to B every time they go somewhere. So, you know, I think that's a wonderful vision, and I think it's a place where everyone would want to live. So this cycleway has been constructed, or this change to Featherston Street, it's not just a cycleway, it's been constructed with that vision in mind. In previous documents, the Palmerston North Roads and Streets Plan, there's a hierarchy that's described of priority for transport modes, and top is pedestrians, and then comes cyclists, and then comes public transport users, and then comes private vehicle users, and last comes on-street parking. And I think if our vision is as described, that's a pretty good priority list of what we want to do and how we want people to get around. The status quo is not the status quo. If we continue with the way our city is right now, in 10 years' time, with more population and more private vehicles on the road, with private transport being the way most people get around, we'll have more congestion, it'll be less safe and less pleasurable to get about on foot, on a bike, using public transport. And it won't be unsafe, but it'll be less pleasurable to drive about in a car because you'll be waiting quite a long time for other people to drive about in their cars. So just to summarise, I think change is hard, and that's particularly for people who feel personally impacted by the change, so people that use Featherston Street a lot. However, if we're going to achieve the city that is our vision, we need to make these changes. So, thank you.
Perfectly timed as well. Thank you. Thank you, James. So we'll now move through to, again, we'll take your commentary on board as well. We now have another online speaker, and I'll now ask Bob Snelden, who's the chair of the Greasy Chain Charitable Trust, to speak. Welcome, Bob. If you could unmute yourself, Bob.
Okay. Hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for this opportunity to speak today. Today I'd like to address the Featherston Street upgrade in the context of the bigger picture and the council's long-term plans for Palmerston North to make it a great livable city. I believe others will address the details of the current work in terms of their own context. Just a short story to begin. My wife and I own two businesses in a country town in Australia, about 8,000 population. And the town had a busy main street running through the centre. And when we arrived there in 2010, it had 23 empty shops. That's probably about 50% of the shop population. We revisited that town, would you believe, 3 weeks ago, and it's booming. There were more people walking the streets and some were cycling. As an example, there are now best in state homeware stores, and would you believe, 10 small gift shops. In fact, it's the go-to town for anything homeware. Yes, there are still a few empty shops, and that's a normal turnover in retail. And yes, the main street is still busy, but it's being well shared with traffic vehicular traffic, pedestrians and cyclists. And how was that achieved? It was achieved by a joint combination between the Council and the Chamber of Commerce following a long-term plan to make it a most livable city. Now, when my wife and I arrived in Palmerston North some 7 years ago, we fell in love with the city, and that love affair still continues today. We actually love living here, and we congratulate the Council during the time that we've been here. And the upgrade to Cube Street I think, is a great example. Mr Mayor and councillors, I'm sure that you'll hear today, and you've already heard a couple of different views about the Featherston Street upgrade. We've put in a written submission, and I'm sure that you've seen that. You'll hear some people want more parking spaces, some want less, some want more traffic lanes, some want less, some want a separated cycleway, some want none, and so on. The councillors, as you consider these, and I'm impressed with what James had to say, would you please keep in mind two important things. Firstly, there's already been tremendous involvement and community consultation. And in fact, as someone who's worked around the world in change management, I've been extremely impressed with how it's been managed. And I congratulate council and the council employees who have undertaken that process. And secondly, the underlying principle of what you're trying to achieve as a council is to make it a most livable city. And I'd like to keep that in mind so that the place becomes a city where people can move about, do their day-to-day stuff, work, play, shop, commute, school, etc. My personal dream and my vision for Palmerston North is to see it become the most livable city in New Zealand. And I hope that this current council is well on its way to helping me achieve or see my vision in reality. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Bob. Again, well timed. Now go to our fourth speaker and invite Brian Moore up, please. Welcome, Brian.
Yeah, greetings to all. I am a cyclist that does 3 or 4 trips down Featherston Street every week, sorry. And I do find there's a certain two or three things that do cause me extra concern, and that's turning into Tainui Street. In the old layout, I used to be able to pull into the middle of the road and wait till it was clear, but now I can't. So what I do is crossed over on the pedestrian crossing and bike down the footpath, but that's another thing. And then if I'm down outside McDonald's and wanting to cross over Rangatiki Street, I wait for the green line, and the green light goes, but then the cars on the right of me want to turn left at the same time. That's who gives way to who. Is it just the first one across or first one wins? But then if I'm a wee bit late and trying to push through on the green light, and the car beside me is trying to push through on the green light, who wins, or how does it work? Who gives way to who? And I'd like to know that. The other thing is that if I'm concerning more footpaths and biking on the footpaths, I don't really know the clear indication of the council on that. But if battery bikes have a motor and 2 wheels, and I claim them as motorbikes, and they're allowed to go up a footpath, am I allowed to do the same? They don't have to have a helmet, and they can go faster than I can. I can only push bike at the speed that I'm biking, and it's not very fast. And I just felt I'd like to know the council's results or council's clarity on that and what can be done and what can't be done, and if anything can be done. Just to help me in this, I ask for you to say.
Thank you, Brian. And look, I'll make sure that a council officer perhaps communicates with you over some of your questions and concerns there. Now invite Alan Birchler, who's a business owner on Featherston Street for piano services. Alan, welcome. And if you could just push the button there to get the microphone going. All yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With a new layout on Featherston Street, the traffic is slowed, causing a concertina effect, making it very difficult to pull out from driveways, from businesses and existing side streets to the point of it being dangerous. On the 27th of September 2023, at the extraordinary meeting on Featherston Street, the City councillors voted to approve this project based on the information they were given at that council meeting regarding changes agreed and arrangements with businesses I'll remind you of what was heard at that meeting and what the councillors approved in respect to myself piano services. And here's the transcript from that meeting. Looking most closely at the provisions for piano services to be able to load and unload pianos, a lot of conversation and options have been looked at, and there we have come to an arrangement with that particular business that will allow him to pull up his trailer to load and unload pianos that doesn't materially affect the design, but just really an operational approach that we are taking, so we have resolved that. This arrangement presented to the meeting has been voted and agreed on by council and must remain. Any changes to the cycleway plan in relation to the piano services is to me not acceptable. Considerable time was spent to find a workable solution. Parking services and your legal team, in my view, must comply with councillors' wishes. The result is I have received and paid, without prejudice, $120 of parking fines. Are you going to pay these back? I believe the City Council is not being told the truth, preventing them from making an informed decision. This is most likely systemic with this whole project. At the September meeting, a request was made by an elected member for a business impact statement. Today, I see is a stakeholders engagement report, basically a statement saying how good the engagement has been. I ask the councillors not to be blindsided by this smokescreen. You have not been provided with what has been requested. Where is the business impact statement? The Mayor, via email correspondence, has asked the CEO to make direct contact with myself. This has not happened. I often ride a push bike to work, transiting down Rangatiki Street. I do not turn right into Featherston Street because of the traffic flow, opting to ride down either Hathel, Argyle or Bereford Street, and sometimes riding the public walkways between those streets. It is the safest route, and no amount of improvements to Featherston Street will ever be as safe. This project is a dog's breakfast. I have a business to operate, a residential property directly affected by these changes, and I will do what I have to do to continue to operate, no matter how hard you try and make it. Due to the general nature of my work, my solutions are often artistic. As the Palmerston North City Council seem to appreciate, that there is something artistically pleasing in long lines of traffic backed up, I will do my best to comply with your requests. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. That's our time, but I will follow up on some of your comments and requests, especially around the parking and enforcement. Thank you. Okay. All right. We will put through a recommendation that we receive this public comment. I'm happy to move that. It's seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I'll open it up if there's any comments. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my first point is, unfortunately, with the 3-minute allocation to public comment per submitter, there was no time for questioning to even pursue some of the concerns that were raised, which are actually very concerning as far as the deliberation to get to this point, and still have revealed that the concerns around the school particularly been expressed quite clearly from their principal that hadn't got through to this table. So without labouring the point, there's more deliberations to come. I just want to make the point of concern around unfortunate time for further questioning. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And as Councillor Dennison said, without the opportunity to speak to each of the comments, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank the submitters for coming in and making public comment today. I think what it demonstrated really usefully is the range of feelings, responses, experiences that have been raised through the consultation and implementation of this process. And I think it's important to recognise, again, as I know you have, Mr. Mayor, that we're not yet at the end of this process, and so people's experiences and opinions will continue to change, and it's important that we continue to be connected to that conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, councillors, and I too just want to pass on my thanks to the speakers and public comment this morning. To have 5 speakers shows there is some depth and feeling around what is happening and on all sides. And look, I just want to say to everybody that we will, those that have made some commentary about different things that perhaps have or haven't happened, we will try and follow up on those as best we can. But I do remind you that things haven't actually been completed yet, and it's like judging a house that's just coming out of the ground. To the officers, it's something that we've got to move on as quickly as we can, because this is difficult for the likes of Mr. Birchler, who is trying to run a business on this this road. So I hope those comments are taken seriously. All right. We'll look to move this, so I'll ask you to vote, please. That has passed 15 votes for, none against. Thank you. Okay, we'll move through to number 7 on our order paper, and yeah, there was. We will catch that up. Just moving through to, number 6 on is presentation here around changes to Featherston Street, and I'll invite Mark Bell-Booth and Brian Holmes up to the table. And this is around, there's a small presentation to this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I like the improvements. It's great to be here. It's a long time since I have been in Council, and it would obviously take something significant for me to find my way back to the door. This is it. This is an issue of real concern to our community. This is local people, local business, local jobs that all stand to lose with this upgrade program. Get my hand on this. Can we move that to number 2? Featherston Street in this zone that you determined would be redesigned, firstly, is a commercial precinct. Commercial precincts are places where business has a legitimate right to be undisturbed. Right now, every business in this city is finding the going very tough. They do not need this council to be foot tapping them. And that is what has happened here on Featherston Street. You've heard it from Alan. I've watched it with Brian's business. Why has it affected me? Because my wife refuses to go and park in the middle of the road. She is fearful of being hit or her car being damaged as she stops to pick up a coffee. Where is the sense in that design? People in cars in commercial precincts come first. They go there, in the case of Rowan, to drop children off, to trade ideas, to trade knowledge. Teachers are there, children are there. In the case of Brian, people come to trade coffee for cash. In the case of Torpedo 7, it might be a tent. In the case of our local barber, it may be a haircut. They trade and they come primarily in cars. And the rules of the road are, in commercial precincts, cars come first. And that has been abandoned in this plan by council. Somehow, the interests of cyclists and pedestrians have been over-elevated. And there was an appropriate study of the maps that went through council in September and look at that particular map, I think it was K, and say, what is it about that map? Look, we're going to stop cars, we're going to put people in the middle of, almost feeling like they're in the middle of the road. Can we have the next slide?
And press it now.
Okay, the left or the right?
Right. The right.
I've turned it off. Now that wasn't supposed to happen. There we go. Can we go down to the next one? In Brian's case, talking about the impact of business, Brian's business stands to lose the equivalent of 250 cups of coffee a week. If you take a finely balanced business, like any business in this city right now, and you ankle tap it for 250 coffees per week, that's massive. If someone came to you and said, or the officers and said, we're going to ankle tap your salary, your income, to something of that impact, how would it be? This man tells me he's been coming here, he's been involved in this issue for 2.5 years. He's known about it since an officer approached him 2.5 years and said, we're going to put a cycleway through here. And now he carries the impact. And that is not right. In today's economy and in a region, in a zone where he has a right to be with undisturbed trade. If you were his landlord, he'd be all over you with lawyers. And yet it's okay. It's much more than concern. It's going to cost people in his business jobs. Do you realise that? Are you aware of that? That's the impact of this plan. How will council mitigate his loss? Are you planning to? Or are you going to pay a nice, let's wait till everyone will be happy by the time this rolls out. I'm here today because this is not going to get better, it's going to get worse. And it will get worse when my wife's car or someone else gets rammed in the back, or when there's some sort of an accident on either end of Featherston Street and the ambulances or the fire trucks or whatever can't move because there's a bus stopping. This is crazy. How did this get through council? How did you approve it? And why did you approve it? Next slide, please. This is the reaction that your ratepayers are feeling. Why are they here? Because you really expect me to park out there? Is that what you believe is appropriate? Next slide. You're kidding me. Buses stop in the middle of the road. This is an embarrassment. I'm here today because I don't want to see this for us as a city to become embarrassed. You mean you stop buses in the middle of the road? This is bad road planning. It should never have happened. Next slide. Commercial precinct rules are cars to the curb, buses to the side of the road, unimpeded traffic movement on arterial roads. And that's what you're hearing today, and from your ratepayers, they're all saying to you how long the queues are on Featherston Street. They can't move. Because your plan has impeded traffic movement on that road. Next slide. Now, here's the rub, where the rub meets the road. Because you have the power to change it. You could change it today. You could change it by resolving to go back a slide and say, we want a plan, we insist on that council gives us a plan where cars are to the curb and buses to the side of the road and the arterial road traffic movement is unimpeded. That's it. This council, this group, if the Mayor moved a resolution, that could happen. And the officers are told. Next slide. I was involved in an example of reversing a bad decision. You just imagine if you were here now and dealing with the issues of the IRD building. We stopped it. We said that can't go ahead. And I'm saying to you, we had advice from the officers to say this is a good idea. But the council, this collaborative group here, that you are an elected representative of the people to represent, reverse that decision. I'm saying to you, that needs to happen now. That's the same decision, it's the same reason you need to stand against officer advice, you need to reverse it, and you need to take those principal plans of cars to the side, to the curb, buses to the side, and unimpeded movement of vehicles on an arterial road. Brian, after that impassioned,
Thank you very much.
Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I will, if you don't mind. Look, I've been in business 12 years and I'm not going to let it die just because you guys made this decision. I've been hanging on for 2.5 years fighting this cycleway and the Summerhill cycleway. I'm not against cycleways. We sponsor the Manawatu junior team. Now, I'm not going to be able to sponsor those girls to ride their bikes if I don't have any income. So those sponsorships that I do currently, junior sports, the schools, whatever you like, they'll have to stop. So I hope you guys can step up and do that promotion that us small business guys do in Palmerston. Anyway, thanks, Mark. Look, I'm going to take more than 3 minutes because, shit, my business is at stake and I think I should take more than 3 minutes because this is my last chance. So sorry, I'm going to break a few rules, but sometimes you've got to break the rules and just see how you go. I want to cover 3 things that are key to the 900 metres of cycleway you've built. A cycleway that passes through the busiest intersection, passes 2 busy schools, crosses the entranceway to McDonald's, Woolworths and Mitre 10, all in 900 metres, and a handful of local businesses, which I don't think you really care too much about. You need to ensure that we need to stay in business, employ staff, pay wages and pay tax. How else are these green issues going to be paid? You can't cut the hand off that feeds you. Where does this money come for these issues when you want to do this? From the taxpayer and the ratepayer. The worst you can do is cut us out. There's three things I'd like to cover: the urban cycle plan, some safety issues, and a bag of inconsistent messages. Most of you who are in favour to support the cycleway wanted it because of the urban cycle plan. And of course, because we had to get the money quickly from Waka Kotahi. Urban Cycleway, I've read it many times. Developed in 2019, based on data from 2013. It's pretty old, outdated. But it states, new urban areas to have separated cycleways. Well, I've driven around the city. Where are the new urban cities? Cycleways. None of those developers have created one cycleway. It was in your plan in 2019 to have all the new urban areas to have separated cycleways. Nothing's done. I guess the developer wants an X section to sell. Cuba Street Cycleway, you spent a fortune there and it said a cycleway there. There's a few markings on the ground of a bike. Is that a cycleway? So you've missed that point. There was no mention of floating buses in your urban plan. We've got floating bus stops. And there was consideration for narrow streets. I think Featherston's a narrow street. So none of this has been done. So the cycleway project you've done has had little reviews or no reviews. How do you get away with spending so much money and not doing a review? What have you learnt from the ones you've done? I don't know, because you haven't done the review. It's not normal business practice, and it's poor stewardship of our money if you don't review what you've spent. It's all very well to say we're building a house and let's judge it when we're finished. I think you're just building a block of flats, and the first flat leaks, the second flat leaks, and you're still building the third the same way. It's not a house, it's just a group of individual projects. Now, safety, that must be the biggest topic, because that's what drove the project through. Can I just have a show of hands from you members? Who has read the safety audit report? Houses, no hands are up. Okay, that makes it easy, doesn't it? Because you voted in favour of this because of safety. And I sort of wonder how you knew it was safe. You didn't see the safety audit report, yet none of you are skilled in health and safety. Yet you voted because this is a safe option. What did you vote that on? What was your fact? What came behind that vote? I've actually just got a copy of the safety audit report through Official Information Act. It took a while because they told me it needs to go through the legal department and it's got to be heavily tagged. Now, this is a safety audit that has to be heavily tagged before a member of the public sees it. What are you hiding and what have you hidden that I haven't got? I've done a bit of a quick review on the 66 pages, which involves the whole length of Featherston Street. There was about 2 pages on the Araha to North Street, and they've done a great job of editing and writing about the straight lines you've painted. Nothing about safety.
So, Brian, can we wrap it up? I've been pretty...
Look, I'm sorry about it. I think I have an opportunity to speak a little bit longer. I know you've got a lot to do, but honestly, this is my last chance, isn't it?
No, it isn't your last chance, but if you could wrap it up, please, yeah.
Okay, well, I can go on and on. I've got notes from the council. They've told me a pack of lies. We can't do the lights yet. The phasing can't work because we've got to go through the Waka Kotahi, we've got to do plans. So here we have the phasing. It took all those months to do the plan and the phasing's still not done. So the lights aren't working. This is a shambles. Sorry, I've got a lot more to say, but obviously time's up. I'll take questions though. Happy to take questions.
I'll allow, yes, I can, and in standing orders, I can take questions. So, well, you can take questions, I should say. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mark. I was interested, you covered your first 2 points pretty substantially. Can I just inquire what your third point was that you outlined? You had 3 key points. Can I understand what that was?
The bag of mixed messages. I had my first visit from a council staff member 2.5 years ago, stood outside, looked at the looked at the road and said, I've been out here for 10 minutes, there's going to be a cycleway whether you like it or not. So I just think consultation is a load of crock because 2.5 years ago I got told there's going to be a cycleway here whether you like it or not. So everything happened since then till now has just been ticking the boxes to say yes, we've consulted. And I've got lots more instances like that where we were told something and nothing happened. And I got 2.5 years ago that's going to happen whether you like it or not. So what's that about?
Okay, and second question, Mr. Mayor, just in regards to some of the decisions that were getting made, there was an emphasis on communication being provided with the stakeholders along that street. How is the ongoing communications from council with you as we progress the
Well, I guess, you know,
project?
they formed that great email address called Cycleways. This is just an excerpt from one of the questions I asked. Hello, Brian. We're not a fire service waiting for a call out. While this is probably top of your mind, this was some yellow lines to stop people driving parking across my driveway. Some yellow lines they omitted. They said they would do them. I'd waited 3 weeks. So I wrote and said, where are they? We've got a lot more on our plate than what you appreciate. They go on and on about it and said, you should perhaps train your customers to park properly. This is the council employee. Suggest you raise any further issues with the transport manager. We're just too busy delivering this project. So that was the flavour of the communication I got. I went back and said, look, you're not a fire service. I've never seen you start a fire, not put one out. So I've got more and more examples of this. I've got an example where they even told a public member that Ebony Coffee supported the car parking in the middle of the road. I never supported the parking in the middle of the road. And I went and asked that question. They said, well, the other option was no parks. And I never saw that either. So why quote me supporting a car park in the middle of the road when I didn't, on a letter to another member of the public? I get this every day in my business. 150 customers will come and tell me about what's happening now. Someone from Auckland came in the other day and said, I've heard about this in Auckland. I've come to have a look. I'm visiting my mother. I can't believe it. She walked in and said, we don't even do that, something that silly in Auckland. So don't, look, this is, I've had more communication from customers than when we started scanning for COVID passes. People are saying, this is ridiculous. Who's got common sense? Where's the brains? So anyway, we've got a whole group forming now in Palmerston North that will help support that.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Brian, for coming along. My question relates to the safety audit that you were talking about, that you've seen, that you've got a copy of. The reporting to us just told us that there weren't any concerns raised through that safety audit. But I'm just wondering, are there any concerns that have arisen from you reading through that audit that we should be aware of?
That report really audited the lines on the road. Now, I've got a situation with a mother with a baby in the back of the car who came in and said, what shall I do? I'm parked on the road. I need to get a baby out of my car seat. If I open one door, I'll get wiped out by a car. If I open the other door, I'll get taken out by a cyclist. Because the cyclists now think they are bulletproof. They can go down that road. They're going faster down the road now. The 10 a day are going faster than what we ever had. She said, how do I get my baby out of the car? The audit report didn't mention any of this stuff. Didn't mention the unsafe turning. We've had 2 near misses where someone's turned into Lombard Street on the left and the cyclist is hidden by the cars going very fast. 2 near misses become a first aid incident, become a serious injury, become a fatality eventually. So that was it. None of that was mentioned in the audit report. It was all about, have we marked the lines further enough from the curb? All you've done is resurfaced the gutter. And I got one cyclist who said, we don't bike in the gutter. That's where the rubbish off the road goes and we do our tyres in. Another cyclist is still cycling down there. She said, we've watched drivers get out of their cars for the last 20 years and they're learning slowly. Now we've got to cycle down the inside. No one knows about getting out of a car. And it's the only bit in Palmerston North we do that. All the rest we bike down the outside and watch the driver. This is the only 900 metres in town where you bike on the inside and watch out the passengers side. This is what they're going on about. So I think your safety audit's fine, but 2 pages on one huge area and nothing about the safety of the people. Nothing about parking on the road. You've heard parking on the road. Who wants to park it? One parent said, can you be quick? I've got kids in the car parked on the road. They said to Dad, what are you doing leaving us parked on the road? Where are you going to the shop? So you've got a parent with kids who can stay in the car, a mother who can't get a kid out of the car.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, thank you, Mark. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you coming in and sharing your concerns. All right, Council, we have a couple of recommendations there, an additional one from myself, but that first of all, we received the presentation for information. The second one, I'm going to test the room, that I'm going to ask the Chief Executive to report back on alternative options around the in-lane bus stops on Featherston Street and pause any further work until a further decision is made by this council on that matter. I need a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Meehan. Okay, thank you to the speakers. 7 speakers this morning. I'm still very committed to ensuring that we have something there that's completed and we make a true judgment on that. And I appreciate comments from both Brian and Mark. But the thing that really does get me is the stopping of the buses in lane. And I'm speaking for myself here, but that overlay that came in, and call it floating bus stops, whatever you want to call it, was very much 11th hour. And we care about the businesses, but we also care about the people as well. We've heard from the disability sector that they have issues accessing those bus stops. I'm not sure where they came from, and I understand there was alternative ways of doing it. That was never put in front of us. Certainly, well, it wasn't put in front of me anyway. So I just want to understand what were the other options and are there better options. I went to the Anzac service yesterday at Palmerston North Boys High. I saw the second piece of concrete being poured outside in the middle of the road outside Boys High. I do have real concerns about the safety of these bus stops and floating in the middle of the road. So I just want to test that, because that I think has been somewhat misleading in advice to us. So I'm going to test the room to see where that goes. But again, just want to acknowledge the speakers and the passion that you've shown on all sides, as we do really want to get a safer outcome on the road as well. All right, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And through you, and reserving my right to speak to this, I wondered if I could ask the CE for a comment on the feasibility of what's being proposed.
Through the Chair, certainly, yep, there's already work underway, so pausing any other further work, we'll just have to have a conversation with contractors and the like and that around it, but that's feasible.
Oh.
What would be the implications in terms of the contract? Where we've got people working at night and things at the moment to try and get this done. What are the implications there of pausing a contract like that?
It would need to have a closer look at the contract. I don't know the details that actually might be sitting within that contract at the moment, but generally it's just a negotiation with the contractor about delaying work. So I don't know whether there'd be any other financial implications at this point in time until we've had the conversation.
And so would that be part of what you would report back on in this, if this recommendation is successful, the implications of taking those steps?
Through the Chair, no, I wouldn't necessarily be reporting back on what the implications are, because they would have occurred. This will be just simply reporting back on other options that might be available.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll come back into the queue for a comment.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. My question was similar, really, around the contractual obligations, and in particular the Waka Kotahi funding that I understand is about 90% of the funding. I had understood that that work had to be done by the end of June. I'm just wondering if we could have some clarity before we move into the decision-making part of this, as to whether that funding is compromised if we stop this at this point.
Through the Chair, I'll just check with Mr Dyberg whether or not he's got some indication of that.
Through you, Mr Chair. So you're correct that we have to have all the money spent by the end of June, otherwise we can't claim it. At this point, the majority of the work is complete. The piece that is still to be done are the cycle separators, so they're still being manufactured. The current schedule would see them starting to be installed from the middle of this month and finished by by mid-June, I think it is. The work around the traffic lights, that has been done by Wakakotahi, so there's no cost on us directly, but that hasn't started yet. But they're anticipating, I understand, having the sequencing on the lights changed by the end of May. So, so that won't have an implication. So, probably the key one is around the separators. So, if we stop that, then we would. And we weren't able to do it by that time, we would end up covering the cost of the construction and the installation of the separators.
Could I just ask a question, because you just said we would cover the cost of the construction of them. I understand they're already constructed or being constructed?
The manufacture of the separators is underway now. So right. there was a delay in trying to get the moulds working, but they are. I think this basically as we speak. I think the first ones are being manufactured, so they will be. I think there's 40 scheduled to be made this week.
Okay, standing resolution wouldn't stop what's being made.
Yeah, so I suppose that would be clarification that we would seek, is that right. we would, in terms of the different elements of it. So if we were able to keep going with the separators, then we could certainly would have no impact from that perspective.
And the installation is rocking up and bolting them into the ground, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really was going to pursue sort of the questioning that Councillor Naylor actually pushed, just in terms of the potential loss of the Wakakotahi funding for the remainder of the project. I just really want to nail down, if we actually were looking for some work around a further decision in terms of the matters which you have raised, Mr. Mayor, what is the likely time frame? Is that likely to be beyond the 30th of June? So therefore, I'd really want to have some understanding of the loss of, or potential loss of funding. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, I would suggest that would be as soon as, depending on which way this resolution goes, if it was to be accepted, I'd imagine that officers would be working on it today to get a report back to council as quickly as possible to minimise any financial impacts. So, in suggesting to you, it would be before the end of the financial year.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just in regards to stopping the bus in your recommendation too, I also just wanted to inquire about the resealing of the middle carriageway, which was sandblasted with the old lines, and now it's broken up the road surface. Can I get a comment on how we're looking at approaching to get that rectified, rather than wait the 2 years or 3 years that was first intended that we could wait?
I'll get the Chief Infrastructure Managers.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, thanks for the question. So I think that's a bit of a no regrets piece of work actually that we're looking at. So you're right. The impact of taking the lines off the particularly that centre carriageway was a lot more destructive than we anticipated. So we have been investigating options for resealing and bringing that forward. We've looked at a number of options, but the only really practical option is to asphalt it. So what we're looking at, and we're just sort of trying to finalise a price on that, would be to on the east side of the intersection, there's already AC in the carriageway, so it's only the piece in the middle. On the east side, on the west side, it would be the full width that we haven't done for the length of the carriageway. So our proposal would be, subject to finalising pricing with Higgins, is to get that done and probably do it this year. My sense is that that is a no regrets move, because we'll have to do resealing in the next 3 years. As we've said, it's been we've damaged it to a greater degree than we anticipated. The AC option would be a long-term option. While it is relatively expensive, it would mean the road would be, we wouldn't need to come back and reseal it for a long time. And then if we did have to do, say we wanted to take out the existing bus stops, we've still not really disturbing that bit we're doing anyway. So we would be planning on continuing on with that.
Can I, thank you, Chris. Mr. Mayor, can I just have a further question to that? As I would understand it, would that obviously require the road markings to be redone through that carriageway? Have you got an indication of what extra cost it would be for the resurfacing and to do the line marking? Can I understand what extra impact this is now having for the city? Just indicatively.
So, like I said, we're still sort of negotiating the price. We believe that we can do it within our existing budget, road resurfacing budget this year. So, from that perspective, it's probably moving around some things. So, bringing that effectively, we're bringing that work forward out of a future year and probably delaying some other stuff. So, if you took that view, you would say there's sort of no impact. But the bottom line of doing that much resealing is probably in the high 300,000s.
Okay, that's enough information for now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions as well. Firstly, just trying to understand, and it's probably for staff, the balance within the outstanding work in terms of how much of the outstanding work is related to bus stops and how much the outstanding related work is related to the cycleway.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the bus stop work is pretty much complete. So if you've gone down there, there's these sort of raised platforms that are that the pedestrians come up to get onto the bus. They're complete. So in terms of the money that we've spent on that work is all done. The only work that really is to be done now is the cycle separators, and that's the last bit we've got to do. The piece around the resealing, that would be sort of effectively a separate project that we would be taking on as the city. So yeah, the bus stop work is done. I think we're still doing some work on the shelters. I think, yeah, so the shelter work is still done, but of course that is again a separate project that's been done as part of the bus network changes.
Great, thank you. Would officers then have any interest in offering advice to council around the idea of pausing immediately versus the idea of pausing as soon as those separators are in place?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, in essence, pausing, if we're leaving the separators aside, means it has no impact because effectively that piece is already done. So, I guess like I said, as long as we clarify what you want to do with the separators in the meantime, but if that went ahead, it would have no impact on the project. And like I said, I believe that continuing with the resealing element would be a no regrets move as well. So we could, and I think one of the advantages will be work around the traffic lights will also be completed this month. We believe that a lot of the congestion is because those lights phasings don't work. We heard one of the residents talking about the problems they have, and that comes down to the fact that light phasing hasn't been changed. So effectively, we would potentially have the option of presenting some options around bus stops at the same time as having the project finished and being able to consider those options in the context of seeing how it works when it's all completed.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, if I can come to you then with a question in terms of understanding your intent around the language in recommendation 2, vis-a-vis what we've heard in terms of installing separators and that the bus stop side of things has already been completed. Are you seeing an immediate stop as of 10:30 today, or?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And the officers have given responses about how quickly things can come back.
Yeah, thank you. I'll reserve right to speak. Thank you.
I wish somebody would speak. Councillor Wood.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I have a question as well, if that's all right. This is probably to you, given we're talking about two separate contracts here. One's Featherston Street and one's the bus stop delivery. I'm sure you're aware that there's other streets in the city where in-lane bus stops being put in place, for example, Pioneer Highway. Would you consider including the bus stop contract full stop to pause on in-lane bus stops across the city and look at alternative models for delivering that?
We're dealing with Featherston Street. This is attached to public comment. I'm not going to wade into. My understanding is Pioneer Highway is there is off street, and I'll just ask the infrastructure manager to make comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes. So the in-lane bus stops on Pioneer Highway at the moment are just interim. So that was allowing those bus stops to start working in time for the start of the network changes, but we will be very quickly moving to have them as indented. So yeah, so what you're seeing at the moment is just temporary, and they will become indented.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chris.
Councillor Finlay.
Are you doing questions and comments?
No, we've done the questions. This is actually the comments, but I can understand that I've thrown this at you.
Right. One quick question then. Excuse me. We heard from one of the presenters about a safety review. I can't recall seeing the safety review. Is it possible for the councillors to have a copy of that safety review, unvetted, supplied to us councillors so we can read it?
I'll ask the CE to respond.
Yes.
We're looking forward to seeing that. Thank you. In comment, I would like to congratulate the people who have planned what they've done in Featherston Street. There are people in Palmerston North who can't wait to see us become more and more like Auckland. Well, the work we've done in Featherston Street has brought us a lot closer to Auckland. We now have traffic jams, which we never really had before. This morning, coming to council, coming down John F. Kennedy Drive to Rangatiki Street, the traffic was built right around the corner, past where you could even see. And it was bumper to bumper all the way into the square. Last Thursday, I was coming down Featherston Street heading towards Rangatiki. Coming into the roundabout around Russell Street, this is about 2:30 in the afternoon, it was right back to there. So when I got around that, I went another way because you're never going to get from Russell Street roundabout through there in a rush. So congratulations, we now have traffic jams in Palmerston North, and I think we should be celebrating that, I suppose, if you want to be like Auckland.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just to start with, as someone who supported Featherston Street, I've found that I've had to explain the rationale to many people in recent weeks as to why I supported that decision. And there were two main things. One was that I am committed to our strategic goals of getting people around the city more safely and for it to be more safe for pedestrians and cyclists. And the other strong component in that decision was that when we deliver things, it's a great opportunity to deliver things when we're not demanding the total cost of that to the ratepayer. And this was a really good opportunity with Waka Kotahi funding 90%. I think the community have spoken really clearly. Some of our community have spoken really clearly that they're in real support of what we're doing, despite the fact that it's messy and it's causing some bother at the moment. Some of our community have also raised some really legitimate concerns. Personally, I was a little bit taken aback when I realised that the design was particularly the bus stops. I think around the table it's been raised before whether we have community licence for a level of change, and at the moment I don't believe we have the community licence for this level of change. I think whilst it would be nice to let it finish and then reassess it, I think when we're getting this significant feedback from our community, I think we do actually need to take some action and say, hang on, have we got this right, rather than just to box on. So I will be supporting this recommendation, not because I've agree with all the comments that have been made today, or that I have stopped agreeing with our strategic goals. As someone who had, last September when we had that debate, and I have gone back and had another watch of that meeting, because it was a significant decision, and I wanted to remember the questions that we asked of the consultants, and certainly we did pull the design to bits a little bit and got some quite good assurance that a lot of that would be resolved through the final changes of that design. I had recently experienced cycling in the Netherlands, which was a very positive experience for me, and I experienced cycling down separated cycleways where there was the traffic, then there was the parking, then there was usually a little bit of a berm of some sort, and then there was the cycleway. The difference that I've observed, because I do cycle down Featherston Street every week on my way to my other job, and that particular part that we've done that work on lacks that barrier between the parked car and the separated cycleway that I have experienced. And certainly there's probably not, retrofitting a street that wide, there's probably not actually the room to do it quite to the ideal. So this is a very different model that our city is not used to, and I acknowledge that. Any change is going to need to be communicated really well to our community if we're going to proceed. So I do think we need some more engagement, and we need some more buy-in, and we need some more community licence before we continue to progress this, if we are going to continue to progress this in this way. So I think pressing pause is sensible at this time. I have no doubt that we will continue to have a wide range of perspectives. I don't agree that in that area that cars come first. I think we've got children going to school. In my view, safety comes first. As someone who's worked in the emergency department as a nurse and seen the impact of cycle accidents, I'm absolutely committed to safety. And that will always be, for me, a priority over cars' convenience. However, in the whole scheme of everything that we're hearing, I think it's wise for us to press pause and consider if we've got this design right, and if we still believe we've got the design right, think about how we can communicate what we're doing to our community better before we proceed.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually just wanted to come back in for another question, because I'm not quite sure that we have, I guess, understood the financial implications of press pause. So if we actually went to a review, as has been suggested in the second motion or recommendation, if we came back and found that the design was actually inadequate, I really would like to understand what are the sunk costs that we have currently, and what is the potential loss for the council and also for Waka Kotahi if we have to redesign or rethink or even pull out of the contract. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I suppose there's quite a number of scenarios, I suppose, that we could see here. So at one end of the spectrum, that we agree that go back to the original, so we basically take everything out, so that would, and the key cost would be, given what we've done to date, would be basically removing the bus stops and reverting back to, let's say, a curbside bus stop. Our current, and this is a high-level estimate, and I don't understand exactly how it all plays out, but my understanding is that could be sort of circa $200,000, including per bus stop. Because remember, we've put a massive amount of concrete and steel into those berms at the moment. Now, I couldn't tell you how that 200 is made up, but it's and that is just a high-level estimate at this point. So we would, that would be a cost on council. Now, we would need to come back and confirm this as part of the options. So this is just high-level stuff. So don't take it to the bank yet. The cost of the separators in terms of being manufactured and installed, that's a commitment of around about $170-something thousand in total. My understanding is we would be likely still be liable for that, and given we're not doing them, we would probably, that would become a cost on council that we wouldn't be able to claim. So if we put them in, we would claim that from Waka Kotahi, and it would be, well, let's say we got them manufactured and we just hung on to them. My assumption would be we could still claim for the cost of the manufacturer, but we would be up potentially for the reneging on the contract for the installation. So it just depends on how you cut that. And I'm assuming any of the work to do the reclamation would be 100% on us. My understanding is, however, I don't think we would be in the position of having to pay the money back to Waka Kotahi that we have claimed, however.
So before I ask the CE to speak, Chris, that's very different answers to what we got given just a while ago, but I understand that this report would actually bring out those, that's what we're trying to get across, because yours are estimates and gut feel.
Well, we have done over the last couple of weeks, we have done some work, so we have gone to the contractors to get some high-level estimates about what it would be. I think some of the numbers that you were provided previously was, best guesses of what it might be.
To demolish a bit of concrete.
Yeah, so this is, so this is now, so that would be taking it all out, and then effectively reverting back to a curbside. So it is, it would be a lot more than we sort of had thought about. We've also, and we'll put, this is what we're actually confident we can put into a report fairly quickly because we've already done some work.
Thank you. I'll ask the CE just to respond.
Yeah, through the chair. So perhaps just to be clear about what's been asked for here, is there any of the sunk costs or from pausing at the moment would be the installation of the barriers. What will happen is, as part of this report, is that if we come back with some other options, then we will highlight and identify any additional costs that would be associated with removing bus stops or doing other options and what that might actually look like. The other additional work that Mr. Dyberg has talked about is the resealing of the road. It's already in our program. We're just bringing it forward potentially from future years to do it a little bit earlier, and something else might be delayed as a result of that. Does that help? Perhaps not.
Okay, I'm keen to move this on because people are obviously forming some views. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be pleased to hear there is a comment coming. First to say, and it's incredibly obvious at this point in this project that the change is really tough, and I first want to acknowledge all the voices in the room that we've heard from a range of perspectives around those who are absolutely committed to seeing this go ahead, and those that are absolutely committed to seeing it stop or even reversed. Our fundamental strategic direction, colleagues, is around developing a network that does work for everyone. And absolutely in Featherston Street, that is a big change, right? At the moment, that part of the network only works for cars. So for those that have had that exclusive car experience, this change is challenging indeed, and we're seeing some of that challenge come through in the comments here. But my main point that I would make in terms of where we need to go long term on this is that just because most people are in cars most of the time doesn't mean that we should fall into the trap of thinking that all people should have to be in cars all the time. This is about independence, about choice, and about ultimately keeping the network efficient and safe for everyone, regardless of what mode they're in. Now, to the point of what to review, when to review it, and how we actually proceed, I am supportive of having a review. I am less supportive of the idea of that review happening midstream, as is the the proposal in front of us now. My preference would be that we actually get Araha to North completed, it's almost there, and then actually review it in its totality rather than taking a midterm approach here. To my mind, this really ultimately gives us the worst of both worlds. We've already lost out on millions of dollars as a community of investment on this project because of extra time taken ultimately around this table. I don't like to see more investment coming to risk and completion coming to risk if we don't keep moving on it. As well, then we're left with a half-built house, to use the mayor's analogy, and it's a little bit hard to actually see the value of that versus simply getting those separators in place, getting the seal renewed that obviously does need renewed in the street, and getting the rephasing of the lights done so that we can actually have a proper look at how it is working. So my request, Mr. Mayor, be that we separate these two. While I am very sympathetic to and supportive of a review, what my preference is that review would happen subsequent to completing Araha North. So I'll be voting against the second recommendation and urge colleagues to do the same so that we can see that small piece through to completion before review. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harper, who's been waiting patiently online, hopefully yours is a comment.
Yes, it is a comment, Mr. Mayor. I am going for the common sense approach, and I think that I should fully support the Mayor's recommendation. I agree with Councillor Finlay that we should be getting the safety report. I think that that all councillors should be reading that first and seeing what the safety report said. I also think that what Councillor Naylor said was very important, that we should be listening to what our community is saying. And I do think that the school community and listening to the principal this morning was very, very interesting. I do think they're a big stakeholder in this as well as the businesses. So I fully support this common sense approach and fully support the Mayor. And I did say a month ago that I did ask the questions of how much it would cost to take this bus stop away, and I was told 20,000. So to hear this morning it's going to cost 200,000, my eyes nearly fell out of my head. So, and I just think that cost has escalated from 20,000 to 200,000. So I'd be really interested to see that report when it does come back. But I do fully support this approach to put it on hold. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jennison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support the recommendations. I think it's not too early, too late. I think it's time if now is the essence. Let's action it. The stop review, particularly in light of the reseal being talked about, which is proposed to be in this financial year. I think if we're going to make decisions around where bus locations are, where the cycle value is being achieved, and doing the reseal, I think we need to get better information. Some of the other questions that I'm going to include in my comments are, I asked at the time, what would success look like once we've done this treatment with the number of cyclists that we're expecting to be able to uptake and use this without a response? One of the questions that I'm now posed with is, what is the count of passengers that are getting picked up by the bus at those two locations? What is the historical data? What's the current data? What's the foreseeable data? Because everything I see just with the new bus routes and the new buses is that the buses aren't loaded with people. Actually, we're not the early adapters on this new bus route. It might have been the buses were free for the first month, but it leaves a big question mark how many are getting picked up there so close to the intersection, causing so much frustration. So in the report, would it be possible to have the actual passenger pickups from those locations so we can actually justify the disruption that they're causing into that new layout? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wood. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mine's short and sweet. I just want to refer back to one of the speakers who said they're from a school where 500 kids are not safer. And this was all about safety. I don't think we had the right plan. I voted against it at the start, and I still stick with voting against it, and I support the motion that's up now to put a halt to it. And I don't think it should come down to finances. It should come down to safety, is what everybody went with it for, was safety. So let's look at, have we really achieved the safety, or have we made it worse? And I think if you really stop and look, you'll see we've made it worse. We heard from a principal today with 500 kids that he believes it's not safer. We need to stop and think.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I won't take a lot of time. I'll just really sort of, I guess, reinforce, I guess, the position that Councillor Barrett actually articulated before. I won't support the second recommendation, and it's largely around, I'm just not satisfied that this actually negates financial risk to the council, and neither does it support our reputation in terms of our partnership with Waka Kotahi. I think that we've entered into this project together, and they have foreseen that 90% of the funding was available for council to complete this project. We are very close to the end in terms of this particular piece of roadway, and I've said this so many times before in this chamber that retrofitting cycleways into roadways which were designed for cars is difficult. Change is difficult, and I acknowledge the people who have come along here today and actually have said how difficult it is to deal with change. So really, it is really around the financial risks that we face. I don't see the need for this pause. If we came back with a decision to say that, well, we could actually do those, the inland buses better, and then we actually start to pull back and start pulling out stuff that we've already put in there, that cost is actually going to fall on council. And that is bad investment. So I think a review, as Councillor Barrett has said, post the completion of this particular part of the project is the smartest way to go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This rise to support both recommendations. And the reason why I want to talk about this is simply because of also some of the comments that I've heard around this. I think we need to, when looking at this stretch of road or what's been happening around Featherston Street, I think we need to sort of look at the bigger picture and what we're trying to achieve in doing this. Personally, I do support cycleways. I do think that the road doesn't just belong to those that are using cars, but it belongs to all road users. And that includes those on scooters, skateboards, children on skateboards, on footpaths, and also those that are also cycling. And that stretch of road has got a lot of children actually cycling on that, in that area. There are a number of schools, and we have a number of our children that are either cycling to school or crossing on those pedestrian crossings, for example. We need to ensure, in looking at the bigger picture, we actually need to ensure that our transport network is actually suitable for all road users. We need to look at the bigger picture, and in dealing with this issue, we have to understand that the number one thing that actually ignited us is around road safety. We do not need to see another death, near misses, or another accident to actually understand the safety impact around this stretch of road. I do not need to see another report from WorkSafe or any other reports around safety to understand or to see the safety impacts around that stretch of road. I've cycled around Palmerston North and I was hit by a car and that sort of thing. But we do not need to play a game of guessing ourselves and saying, okay, because it's not being used or it's being cycled by, this stretch of road is being cycled by 10 cyclists between 10 and 12 or between 10 and 3 p.m., that the eventuality of someone getting hit by a car is not going to happen. Let's look at the bigger picture. It's all about safety. It's about making sure that our cycle network or transport network is suitable for all road users. There's no such thing as prioritizing cars. If I'm on a scooter, I'm also a road user. If I'm on a bicycle, I'm also a road user. If I'm in a car, I'm also a road user. If my child or my cousin is on a skateboard, skating on the footpath or trying to cross the road, we're all road users, and you can ensure that we're looking at the bigger picture. What is the bigger picture? To ensure that all our network or transport network is suitable for all road users. And we talked about traffic as well. Okay, we might not be Auckland, or we might be getting close to Auckland, as some have said, but I haven't seen anybody getting stuck in traffic for 45 minutes and that sort of thing. This is bound to happen. It's unavoidable. Palmerston North is growing, and by our estimation, by 2043, Palmerston North is going to increase to 110,000 people. It's going to grow. People are going to use cycle more. There's going to be an increase of cycle people, of people using cycle lanes. There's going to be an increase of people using cars, using buses. It is going to grow. It is inevitable. I don't believe that 10 minutes in traffic, actually, we are the traffic. I don't believe that 10 minutes in traffic is comparable to 45 minutes in Wellington, driving out down State Highway 1 in the morning trying to get into Wellington, or trying to get into Auckland in the morning and that sort of thing, and spending 45 minutes on traffic. Yes, it is traffic, but we're not close or near where Auckland is or where near Wellington is. So I just thought that I'll touch that as well, and also just stress the point that all road users should be given priority, not just cars. And we should make sure that we look at the bigger picture to ensure that our transport system is actually suitable for all road users. So I'm happy to support this, and I look forward to the report. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, colleagues, for your questions and answers on this one, and for the useful debate. I find myself even standing to go, I'm not quite sure what we do with this. If it's just about bus stops, I can absolutely hear the community concern about floating bus stops, and that not feeling like it makes much sense to people. And that's not something that's isolated into our community. There's similar conversations happening in Wellington at the moment, and I'm sure in Auckland, although I don't keep quite as close eye on Auckland as maybe some colleagues do. And so I'd be quite happy for us to look at alternative options for the bus stops. I think we haven't taken the community with us to establish whether floating bus stops work for us. Pausing concerns me, and I feel like I'm being asked to make a decision today without certainty around the information about the financial risk that we're opening ourselves to. But a colleague did say that this shouldn't just be about the finances, it should be about safety. And I absolutely agree with that. If we've got it wrong, there will be costs in putting it right. And if that's for safety, then actually I'm prepared to wear that cost. My hesitation is I don't know at the moment whether we've got it wrong. I think the community feel like they have concerns, and they're absolutely valid. But as one of our submitters in public comment said this morning, status quo is not status quo. Where we are now is a reflection of our history. It's not a reflection of where we intend to be in the future. And so to say that something is uncomfortable and people don't feel safe is not the same thing as saying it's not a good thing and it will be safe. But at the moment, we just don't know that. And that is my concern in this debate, is we're being asked to comment on status quo versus an aspirational plan that has had community consultation around it. But Mr. Mayor, I think you have read the room in this one. I think there is a willingness at this point to take a pause and get some information. I don't like it. I actually don't think it's a particularly good process, but I do think it's an opportunity to take our community with us in this journey if we can come back and say this is right and this is why. And so I think, unless somebody has some compelling conversation about to come, that I will support it at this stage. Thank you.
Councillor Zabellin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all. This has been a very helpful debate for my thinking, which is not being fixed on this. I do find the safety element is the most compelling, and given that the safety impacts will be given effect to when the dividers are in place and the light phasing is operational, feel that a pause delays us from achieving those safety elements. If it is about safety, then let's get the critical safety elements in place and then review the placement of bus stops. Or in fact, I don't actually see why we couldn't put those safety elements in place while we concurrently investigate the bus stops if they're separate. So yes to a review, absolutely. But I feel they're separate issues, and I don't want to see us stop the project when we're on the home stretch and the final two pieces that will actually implement some safety in this area get us put further away. So yes, I absolutely see the need for a pause and a rethink on the bus stops and where we place those. But if it's safety first, then we need to put the safety elements in place. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I thought the debate was coming to a close earlier, so I wasn't going to comment, but given it's carried on, I will comment briefly. I want to say a few things. One is that my concern on this Featherston Street design has always been about safety and usability of the road. And what I hear in this debate is a lot of concept and a lot of debate about the idea of a cycleway and the idea of it being safer, and that we would like to see it safer. I hear very little comment from any of my colleagues on the details of whether or not the design of Featherston Street will make it safer for motorists, safer for pedestrians, and safer for cyclists. And so what we've heard today is that we had a goal of making it safer for school students. Both principals of major schools on that road have said they don't think it is. Are they wrong? We've had a goal of making it safer for cyclists. What we've heard today is cyclists coming in and saying they don't believe and they don't feel safer on that road, and that's certainly what I'm hearing out in the community. Are they wrong? What we've heard today and what our goal was is that we will make it better for business, but we've heard today from multiple business owners that it isn't making it better for business. Well, are they wrong? I don't think they are, and that's why I'm supportive of putting this project on pause so we can take a deep breath, reflect on where we're going, and take an opportunity to have a bit of a reset. The experiences we've heard today of those who are using the street are really practical, and I've found that the experience of those who are supportive of this program are largely theoretical, because absolutely in our Urban Cycle Network Master Plan, we should have a cycleway along here. But that doesn't put in detail of what the cycleway will look like. And so this is about going, are the details right? Have we got the design right? And do we have an opportunity, particularly with the bus stop, to look at an alternative mode of delivery? Now, I hear Councillor Ballon's concerns around costs and around the safety elements there. What I would say to that is that the more we put in, the more expensive it's going to be for us to fix. So even with the separators, if we put a line of separators in, and then we say we're actually going to indent that bus stop, we've got to take all those separators out to then do that indentation. So that's why I believe, yes, I hear a safety concern, but the further down this pathway we go, the more it is going to cost us to walk it back if we come to the conclusion that we need to deliver it through an alternative method. The change is difficult argument has come up a few times today, and I find that a really weak argument because, yes, change is difficult, but there's good change and there's bad change. And so it really has to come down to whether or not you believe we're moving in the right direction or not just saying people are averse to change. So, I mean, we could be closing the road and you'd say, oh, well, change is difficult. Well, sure, but at the end of the day, it's about the strength of the argument, not just about whether change as a concept is good, bad, or otherwise. I don't like change. Nobody likes change. That's the nature of it. But if we're hearing overwhelming feedback from our community that this particular change is too much for them to stomach, well, then I think this is the right time to pause. The cost will fall on council. Well, yes, and so it should. At the end of the day, if we've made a decision that we come to believe is the wrong decision and we have to pay to fix it, well, that's on us. So I'm very comfortable with if this cost ends up falling on council. I'm not happy about it. I don't like it. I wish we weren't in this position. But that's the reality of the decisions we've made and we need to own it. So this is sensible. I thank the Mayor for putting it up. I hope this gets through and I hope this gives us an opportunity to reflect on the design that we've agreed to and where we can make it better and genuinely make it safer for the users of that road, because buses stopping in the middle lanes, getting rid of medians where people just have to stop on the road and hope that nobody rear-ends them, I can't see it being safer for all the users of the road. So I look forward to this and I hope it gets supported.
All right, I'll just write a reply.
The comments just asked, I wonder if we could clarify, please, that this is just about reviewing the in-lane bus stop situation and not about median strips.
I'm just about to wrap
Thank
up. All right. Look, thank you, colleagues. I just want to emphasise this is about the buses. So, and and look, we're still going to have a better service, I believe, but it's knowing all the options, and I don't believe we've been told all the options. So we know it isn't 100%. We've been told that by our community, but it's having the courage to actually test our former decision-making process, and were we fully informed? So I just want to understand if we have been, and that'll come through, and in speaking to the CE, I understand that report can come back quite quickly, because that material should be there. We'll understand the costs as well, because we're getting conflicting and gut feel costs from different officers, so let's confirm what that would be, and understand, have we made the right decision? Because we've been told by a number of our community, including regular users, and indeed some of our most vulnerable, the disability sector, that they just don't support this. So that has got me really worried. And again, I've been to the schools, and I just was quite shocked at how unsafe it was outside Boys High. So we can plough on, and my gut feel is, I know it's not 100% correct. So we just got to have the courage to test that. And it's, in some ways, understanding how we're going to address that as well. And I think Councillor Wood's right, is if we've got this wrong, we just have to understand that, you know, what was put in front of us, we may have that wrong. And it may be right too. I mean, but if you don't vote for this to test it, then you are ploughing on this investment just pointless. So it's about the buses. I'm not talking about the cycle lanes, right? So it's just about the buses. And are we okay with what we've done so far? So I just need to understand that, and I don't have all that information. This was an overlay, as we know, that comes in from Horizons. We had NZTA, Auckland staff from NZTA here, showing us what that works in Auckland. Might work in Copenhagen, Seattle, other parts of the world, but is it Palmerston North? Does it work in Palmerston North? And a number of you have spoken about other issues. I'm not going to get into that. It's about the buses. So I just want to focus on that. So ask you to support it. I'm not saying we're not going to do it. I'm just saying let's just test our decision making. And if we've got the courage to do that, I'd ask you to vote for this, please. So we're going to do vote number 2 first, because some of you wanted it separated. And it has passed, 13 votes for and 3 against. All right, we'll go back to number 1, which is around receiving the presentation. Council received the presentation for information. I'm happy to move that, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I don't think we need to have any more comment on this. We will vote, please. And that has passed, 16 votes for and none against. I'll just jump to number 8 and just confirm the minutes next, please. And that's around accepting the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the 3rd of April 2024, Part 1, publicly confirmed as a true and correct record. I'm happy to move those, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Sorry, that wasn't, I wasn't told that. Thank you. All right, we're going to move the entire minutes, and that the minutes of the ordinary meeting of 3rd of April 2024, Part 1 public, Part 2 confidential, and Part 2B be confirmed as a true and correct record. I'm happy to move those, and seconded by Councillor Barrett. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Barrett. I'm understanding your sign language there. That's good. Thank you. Okay. Look, we'll just go back to what I originally said, which is that we'll move the minutes of part 1 public, be as confirmed as a true and correct record, and we'll do the others in part 2. And moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Barrett. Thank you. We'll keep this nice and simple. All right, there being no other matters arising, we will vote, please. And it has passed 15 votes for and 1 abstention. Councillors, I'm going to break now, otherwise we'll be here for a little bit longer before we get a break, and I'm conscious of staff as well. So we will be back in the chamber at 10 past 11. Thank you. Kia ora tātou, welcome back everybody. Right, we move through to number 7 on our order paper, and that's staying with Featherston Street. Wish we could move on, but we're going to continue the Cycleway project and the stakeholder engagement review, and I'll invite Masuma up to our business assurance manager to speak to that. Masuma, welcome.
Morning. Just checking it is still morning. I guess in September last year, you guys had requested that I go away and do a stakeholder engagement review and provide an independent assessment of it, and that is what is in front of you today. So since then, I've had some discussions and agreed the scope with the Chief Executive and the Mayor, and that was just to make sure that we had the intent of the resolution correct, and that's what we have presented in front of you. I won't go into the detail of the report, I guess, but as part of this review, we followed a similar approach to any other review we would do. We've spoken to those that led out or facilitated the engagement process, and we've looked at any relevant documentation that seemed appropriate to be fair in that scope. Overall, I think there are learnings, but in general, it appeared that good process had been followed. And I guess I would like to just reiterate that this was a process review, not a design review, and so that is what's in front of you. But happy to take any questions through you, Mr. Mayor.
That's an apt comment at the end. All right, I'll open it up for any commentary. Yeah, I suppose, sorry, questions. And there is one. Councillor Barn.
Oh, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just, Masuma, I wondered if, you were obviously in the chamber this morning for the comments. There was a comment that came through that the messaging from PNCC had been about this project, that it was going to happen whether you like it or not. And I wondered if that was what your report found.
That is not something I found in the work that I completed.
Thank you.
The Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā koe, Masuma, and thank you for this. Just a query on the top of page 5, you've got down there, overall we noted that the level of engagement undertaken was more than what Palmerston City Council had previously invested in. Forgive me if I've already heard that, but was that by design or had that just evolved as the project continued? Did we make a determination that we would go harder in that?
I think I'll call Liv down to comment on that, but from the review's perspective, I do think it was a conscious decision.
Thank you.
Good morning. I guess it comes in two parts. Part of it is that one of the learnings we've had from College Street and Summerhill the first time round is how we get people more involved in the process, but also that we don't start a process with a design and then seek feedback on a design. We actually go out and get a lot of information before that process occurs. But a part of the Streets for People component, especially of the project, is the co-design element, which worked really well. I do think, it worked well, but I think it would be problematic over time if we kept doing it on streets, because while the street stakeholders would differ for each street, the people who represent, say, service agencies, cycling groups, disability groups, would essentially be having to come and, I guess, argue or plead their case every single time we did something like that. But yeah, that was an intentional call.
Thank you very much, Olivia Masuma.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just probably some clarification around the report. On page 5, you also mentioned that through interviews we noted that there was a perception that senior management and governance were more favourable to the feedback that came from larger stakeholders. Do you mind just elaborating on that?
That's what some of the interviewees had said. And what would you like clarity on? Sorry, can I?
Oh, in terms of like larger, I mean, it can.
That would be the likes of the McDonald's or the Mitre 10s that the reference was to, I would say, in terms of larger stakeholders.
Okay, cool. So, just follow up on that. So you didn't probably, knowing that the perception that you got was that probably smaller stakeholders were ignored in the consultation process, or is it what I'm reading from this or not? From this, that larger, I mean, the perception was that the feedback that came from larger stakeholders were mostly taken into account. Did that mean that other stakeholders were probably smaller or smaller voices were not probably considered?
I think it was a opinion that people had shared, and so I wanted to acknowledge it in the report. But the review's conclusion was that the opportunities presented to all stakeholders, regardless of size, were equal and fair. And they may have decided to take different routes in terms of how they provided their feedback, but the opportunities from a process perspective that were given were fairly similar and fair.
No, thanks for that clarification. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Suma. Just a question regarding page 21, which is page 10 of the document regarding the interviewees and documents reviewed. I note that all of the interviewees were from council's perspective, so it was either elected members, officers, or our contractors. Given this is a stakeholder engagement review, I wondered if you looked at interviewing anybody from the other side, from the community side, business owners, people who attended a workshop, that sort of thing.
No, not from the review's perspective, and that's because, as I mentioned in the intro, we just took a similar approach to what we do in any review, and we weren't asked or directed otherwise to do so. But in saying that, it's not like their feedback wasn't reviewed or covered in the scope, because we were looking at the engagement surveys and we were looking at what feedback was coming through the different co-design sessions and everything.
Thank you. And so you're confident this has captured the full scope of the engagement, even though it's only from the side of council?
Well, because it's a process review, the process was led out by council, so yes, I am fairly comfortable with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Emma, for the report. I have a question arising from page 4 of 10 of the document, or page 16 in the agenda. About towards the bottom of the page, you talk about a case where the engagement styles from stakeholders was not only non-constructive but sufficiently non-constructive as to impact on officer well-being. I'd like to understand kind of what was done pre-engagement to support officer well-being, what was done mid-engagement in terms of adaptive response around those kind of impacts.
That might be a question for management, to be fair.
Through Mr. Mayor. Yep, so we're monitoring the engagement and our staff wellbeing through the process to make sure that they're kept safe. Obviously, we have the health and safety obligations to ensure that those things are in train. There were some instances where we needed to arrange for additional support in that around our staff to make sure that the engagement was undertaken appropriately, but also that our staff are kept, their wellbeing is kept in check.
Thank you. Looking forward, would we expect that those learnings are embedded in any future engagement exercises?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I think that we were quite conscious of that as right from the get-go, given the fact of the topic and engaging with staff and engaging with the community. We're mindful of that all of the time now when we go out and about. You receive the health and safety reports through the Risk and Assurance Committee in particular, and you'll note a number of things that pop up through there from time to time as well around staff safety and those things. So we're very mindful of all of that as we progress on any engagement.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, that's the questions done. So thank you, ladies. So we've got there the Featherston Street Cycleway Project stakeholder engagement review that we received. The memo titled Featherston Street Cycleway Project Stakeholder Engagement Review and its attachment presented on the 1st of May 2024. I'm happy to move it, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Look, thank you, Masuma, and your team. I think we've got to understand the scope of this, because I can see people will read into this that it doesn't uncover every stone, what's under each stone. We've seen a lot of very different views this morning, but the scope was around the past engagement, not now or into the future, and I emphasise around that engagement. And although there has been differing views, I think it's around I think it's quite balanced. Look, there's been many comments this morning, but I do think at the end of the day, council went in, and everybody associated with this project went in with eyes wide open, knew that it was going to be quite challenging, and it's whether people wanted to engage too from the other side. So thank you, Masuma. I think it's helpful to have this. I think from for the officers and from the CE's point of view, it's just what are the lessons learnt from this, where we can perhaps refine some of those things which we perhaps could just do slightly differently next time. So acknowledge the work that's gone on. Councillor Mickelard.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to echo some of the comments that you've also made, as someone who's also attended many of these sessions, and I can attest to the fact that officers have taken a great deal of time really engaging with the community meaningfully. And I've attended a number of those sessions, 3 hours sometimes, and I think Councillor Zabellan was also there, and other fellow councillors. And I just want to appreciate the staff and officers for the work that they put through this process and consultation process. And I understand sometimes the consultation will get competing views and different views, and not everyone's going to get everything that they want. And it's largely reflected by the amount of submissions that we've heard this morning and throughout the process. But I just want to thank the staff for meaningfully engaging with the community around this and giving everyone the opportunity to submit on this. And I think, if we were to engage in this manner going forward, I think it will actually change a lot of the views in the community that the council doesn't listen, or that the council doesn't engage meaningfully with the community. So I just want to commend the staff on that, and on a job well done, and I hope that this will continue in the future. Thank you.
Okay, that's comments. We will vote, please. There's passed 16 for and none against. Thank you. To number 9, notice of motion from Councillor Zabellan on Māori wards. So, Councillor, we have a report too that sits alongside that from officers. I'll take that as being read. We're all quite well versed in that. But I'll go to you, Councillor Zabellan, to speak to your notice of motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Right, so colleagues, I bring before you today a notice of motion just seeking a council endorsement of our current representation structure for a Te Hira Wānui General Ward and a Te Puo Māori Ward, and that a submission reflecting that position be made to the select committee process. And the reasons set out there are that Council's current representation arrangement is working well at giving effect to our obligations under Sections 4 and 81 1A and 1B of the Local Government Act, that the presence and performance of Māori ward councillors has enhanced the mana of council and significantly contributed to our reputation as national leaders in collaborative, mutually beneficial working relationships with the Indigenous people of our nation and to those relationships themselves. That having Māori ward councillors has positively benefited council by increasing engagement with parts of the city's community that have been historically representationally marginalised, and that Palmerston North has a long and proud history of partnership with local iwi that we wish to foster and grow and celebrate. But more broadly, I want to talk about assimilation, because social assimilationist policies have been historically justified in New Zealand on the premise that there is a mainstream culture within which Māori people must become assimilated, and to do so without suffrage, and then to do so with suffrage but without representation, and then eventually with some representation that some still consider to be too much. And in this latest move, the New Zealand government is upholding an assimilationist view that Māori are sufficiently served through the mainstream representation, despite overwhelming evidential basis that it has in fact been a spectacular failure for Māori across generations. And it shows that for some, the right to representation is inherent and inherited, and for others, the right to representation must be obtained and justified by the approval of those who already have it. We have a long history of enacting assimilationist policies in this country, first on the premise of European social superiority, and then on the basis of majority, with the fatal impact theory, which set a moral obligation for Pākehā to smooth the pillow of the dying race and to assimilate Māori into a superior culture, particularly through native schools, so that young Māori could be trained in European ways to become the labourers and domestic servants for which nature had best fitted them. And history is full of ugliness, and we try to distance ourselves from it. But colonisation is a fact of our shared history, and just because some in our community aren't affected by it doesn't make that any less true, and it doesn't make Māori people any less affected. But the door is open now, and we have a system where Māori have some local representation as equal members of this council. And this is world-leading for colonised countries. And we have benefited in just 18 months from the insights and the mana and dignity that our Te Puo ward councillors have brought to our council, from the standard of kindness and respect that Councillor Fitzgerald sets and holds us to, and from the mana wahine example our Deputy Mayor sets and her graciousness. We are better for having them here. So what harm would come from abolishing these seats? The proof's in the pudding. The harmful effects of a lack of representation for 180 years is demonstrated well by damning statistics. We cannot change the facts of our history. We can't change the basis of the foundation of our nation, and we can't change the material damage that's already been done to Māori through deliberate and inadvertent exclusion from representative bodies, but we can do better. And we can be honourable, and we can acknowledge that retaining a Māori ward in our council does no actual material harm to any person, but in fact brings significant benefits. So the New Zealand Crown has had to dole out countless apologies for dishonourable past actions. Let's not make this a moment something our children have to apologise for in the future. So please encourage you to sound your voice in support of our current and future Māori ward colleagues. Ka whawhai tonu mātou. Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Kia ora koutou. I've stood before and I cannot speak on behalf of Māori or for Māori, but I can speak in support of Māori interests. I'm somewhat older than most people in this chamber, and I just want to perhaps just give you a personal perspective of the importance of Māori wards. And I'll start by talking about my school experience. I grew up in a rural area, and I attended the district high school. And at that school, you could go to school from the first at 5, and you left at the end of the 6th form. There was no 7th form. There was only about 200 students in the entire school. And because it was a high school, and the only high school in quite a wide region, when children from, or young people from other outlying areas had to go to high school, they came to Onewharo District High School. And there was a nearby area which was Te Koanga, and that was a predominantly Māori community. And when those students came to the high school, some of them became my friends. I played rugby with them. We hung out at lunchtime. Sometimes they ate my lunch, but nothing has really changed in that regard. But these young people, these friends, they very subtly and very gently introduced me to Te Ao Māori. But the thing is that my relationship with my friends did not go beyond the school gate, and that's the important point. If we take the present coalition's view on Māori wards on its own, we might think that's a little bit benign. It's something that we perhaps need not be too concerned about. But when you actually look at, and there's a very long list of other things that this coalition is actually trying to enact. There's the review of Te Tiriti of Waitangi, a review of the principles of a founding document of this nation. The scrapping of the Māori Health Authority. After 18 months, they said it's ineffective. How can you be effective in 18 months to undo generations of deprivation? It cannot be done. Demoting Te Reo Māori in terms of our government institutions. Removing 7AA from children and young persons legislation will only produce adverse effects and outcomes for Māori people in New Zealand. Repealing the smoke-free legislation. Review of school lunch programs. All of these things will have negative outcomes for the Māori population of New Zealand. So singling out Māori wards, if it was just a loan, it might be benign. We might actually let that go by. But I'm saying today that this coalition's actions are cynical, deliberate, and intentional in terms of isolating, marginalising, and disadvantaging Māori in New Zealand. So let's flip this thing on its head. There is a proportion of our population who actually are encouraging government to take these steps. 17 to 18% of our population is Māori. And if we were going to put a commerce hat on for a moment and thinking about getting our country back on track, re-establishing our economy, why would you ignore nearly 20%, 1 in 5 of your population in terms of the productivity of our nation? Why would you do that? It makes no sense. If we do not empower all of the people in our nation, we can never be our best. Excluding the voice of Māori from this table is not in our nation's interest. To honour Te Tiriti, we need to move our relationships beyond the gate. Māori wards are an essential part of that, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Te iwi rangatane, ke te mihi. So I will be supporting this notice of motion, and I think it's very important that we look at this through a fairness lens. And it's fundamentally unfair to target one type of ward over any other type of ward. So why would we allow a referendum on a Māori ward, but we wouldn't have a referendum on any kind of geographical ward, like a rural ward or something like that? Why is that? That's fundamentally unfair. Another thing that I think is fundamentally unfair is to give a power of veto to the majority over the rights of a minority. That's fundamentally unfair. It's fundamentally unfair to this council for the government to insist that we either choose to abolish our own Māori wards or be subject to another divisive referendum. You know, all of these things I think are extremely unfair. And from our own example, working with rangatane over many years, from the excellent relationships that the Mayor has worked to build up, to the establishment of Māori wards and the contribution of our Māori ward councillors, I think that we're in a strong position nationally to be able to give the example and say, here's how it can work. Here's how it is working really well. Why would you make us undo this? So I think it's very important that we prepare a submission for the Select Committee and that we share our experience in Palmerston North, all the positives that have come from it, that we share that experience with government, and that we let people know that there's nothing to fear from having a Māori ward. There's everything to gain. There's every benefit that can come not only to Māori people, but also Pākehā people. So I think it's really, really important that we speak up at this moment, and I thank Councillor Zabellin for bringing this notice of motion. I just want to touch on the injurious effects of colonisation that I think we just don't talk about often enough. That the system that we have here, the system that we're in at this moment, this isn't a system that suits Māori ways of working. This system of sitting around the table and each person, working to standing orders and all the rest of it, that's a Pākehā system that we're using. And pretty much every element of life in New Zealand is through that kind of lens. And it's against all of that that Māori are expected to somehow fit in. I think Councillor Zabellin used the word assimilation. To fit in to these colonial systems, to make them work somehow for Māori. So even the concept of a Māori ward in itself it's a Pākehā concept that we're expecting people to agree with and to work with. But nevertheless, with tremendous grace, Māori have walked on the journey with us, are prepared to be our partners here in Palmerston North, have stepped forward and stepped up in difficult circumstances to be councillors here. And I think it's really, really important that we understand the benefit that brings to everybody, not just to Māori, but to us all. One of the things that really resonates with me is that in the 60s, this council, with no Māori members around the table, of course, made the decision to desecrate a power site in Palmerston North, Te Motuapotua. That decision would never be made today with Māori voices around the table. And so, we can learn from the past and we can move on and do things better. But we need to acknowledge that things have worked extremely badly in the past. And Māori wards are just a small thing. There's a whole lot more that should and could be being done. But it's one thing that we can support and say, look, this is working for us here in Palmerston North. This is bringing benefits to everybody in Palmerston North, and we want to continue with it. So, councillors, I would urge you to support this motion. It's extremely important that we present a united front here and that we put forward the very valuable and important and significant case for Māori wards to the government and say, please, don't make us go through all this again here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, just one correction there. It was the Kairanga County Council, not Palmerston or City at the time. And if you look back in history, we fought them the entire time on things. And one of those was the levelling of Te Motuapotua. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a really awkward conversation to have, councillors, and a part of me just wants to not say anything and vote against and not create this awkwardness in the chamber. But I think it's important, as I know there's a number of councillors who aren't going to vote for this, that some reasoning is given, because it is not... I think it's important to explain the situation. So I'm looking at this from the philosophical, political perspective of whether we should or shouldn't have a Māori ward. I want to start by outlining that I have immense respect for my Māori ward colleagues. I appreciate what you've brought to the table and the time that you've put in, and what I hope you would continue to put in if we move to a general ward system. I agree with Councillor Johnson, the targeting of one ward is wrong, and I would fully support if government looked at introducing this for rural wards and others, because I agree it isn't fair to target one particular. I'm not going to get into the central government politics because that's not what I'm basing my decision on here, although I would disagree with some of the previous comments that have been made. The reason I'm going to vote against this is because there is not a consensus on this issue amongst the community, amongst non-Māori, but more importantly, amongst Māoridom. Māori wards are a trade-off. You lose voting power on the Māori roll for the guarantee of representation. That's the political trade-off you make to have a Māori ward. So on the non-Māori roll, you can influence 13 elected member positions. On the Māori roll, you can influence 2. And that's a trade-off that many Māori believe are worth it, and it's a trade-off that many Māori believe aren't worth it. And so I speak today representing the view of my many friends, colleagues, and those that I work with who are Māori, who said to me, why could I not vote at the last election? Why did I not have a say in the makeup of the majority of my council? And I explained, because that is the nature of the trade-off that was made, guaranteed representation for reduced voting power. And what they said to me was they weren't happy with it. They wanted to be able to have a say over the whole of our council. They wanted to have influence over the full direction of the City Council. And so I want to be really clear, from that perspective, what we saw in Auckland, for example, when they recently looked at introducing Māori wards, was that 45% of the submissions by Māori were opposed. So I appreciate and have immense respect for Councillor Bell and Councillor Hancock putting this forward. I'm not trying to change anybody's minds here. I appreciate you for standing up for what you believe in and putting forward what you believe is right. And I hope, although it is an awkward conversation to have, you can respect the reasons that I'm opposing this, not because I disagree with the value that Māori councillors bring, not because I disagree with the mana that they've brought to this chamber, but because I believe that the system, that the idea and political concept of a Māori ward depowers Māori votes. And that is certainly a view amongst Māoridom. I'm not at all suggesting that it's a consensus, but there are other views out there, and for that reason, I won't be supporting it.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I think, actually, colleagues, it's really important that we lean into awkward conversations. That is what we are here as elected representatives to do, to hear from our community, to represent the diversity of that view around this table. And I thank colleagues for the opportunity to do that in this context today. And thank you, Councillors Bellin and Councillor Hancock, for bringing this motion to us. I attended, and I think along with maybe some others of you, the Department of Internal Affairs hui on this subject, where they tried to explain to the many elected members from around the Motu where the process by which this would work. Fair to say that conversation was almost entirely derailed by the very, very fundamental philosophical objection to the process itself. And I'm very glad I'm not sitting in those officers' shoes trying to do this piece of work. My primary concern, I don't know if it's a primary concern, one of my many concerns with this proposal that the government is seeking submissions on is that the Minister said in his reasoning for putting this forward that the decision whether or not to have a Māori ward should be made by the community and not by Wellington. But actually seems to me to be the case that by bringing forward this change to legislation, Wellington are absolutely telling communities how they should approach their representation arrangements. Local government, under the Local Government Act, has very strong policies and principles around representation reviews. We go through it every triennium for a period of 6 years to look at the makeup of our council, the number of elected members, which wards they will represent, whether we choose to have community boards, and it goes on and on. And then that goes out for consultation, and anybody can submit to that, and if they disagree with the decision they make, that we make, that can be appealed, if you disagree for it or against it. If we change the proposal and you disagree, that can be appealed. This is a robust and thorough process which this council has engaged with fully. And I was personally pleased to see the repeal of that very divisive poll opportunity that was solely focused at Māori wards by the last government, because what it meant in reality here in Palmerston North when that happened to us was that 5% of our community, which is the number to trigger a poll, got to make a decision about the representative and democratic rights of 17% of our community. How is that fair? It's clearly not, and will never be. And so, hearing the comments that are made about why this could be awkward and accepting that there isn't consensus, maybe across Māori in the widest sense, I would also note that it's up to people who whakapapa Māori to decide for themselves whether they want to be on the Māori roll or the general roll. So if people genuinely feel that their vote is more powerful if they can vote in the general roll, that option is available to them. As things stand, people choose to be on the Māori roll because they're choosing to seek representation, to guarantee representation for Māori around this table. I'm also conscious in that sense that I'd have a lot more sympathy for this referendum idea if it was a referendum of the people on the Māori roll who are being affected by this decision. But to come back to the point very well made by Councillor Johnson, it's not. It's going out to the majority and asking them to determine, in a horribly paternalistic way, what might be appropriate for a minority in our community. And I will not, cannot support that, and I very much hope that it's the view of our council collectively here today as we come to make a submission to this very much foreshortened process where this legislation is being rammed through with very little appreciation for proper community consultation. I hope that we can collectively commit to supporting our iwi, our rangatane colleagues who've walked with this journey with us in good faith, and support continuing that representation for the widest proportion of our community as possible. And colleagues, I'll be very disappointed if this does not go through. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and colleagues, and to Councillors Bellin and Hancock for bringing this forward. Just a couple points I wanted to add here, but firstly to Councillor Wood and those that might be considering a vote along the lines that Councillor Wood's outlined. My view there is that just because Māori wards are an imperfect solution in an imperfect system, as we've already heard, does not justify us disestablishing them or seeing the many benefits that they create being denied to the communities that we serve here. The perfect should never become the enemy of the good. Secondly, it is most disappointing to me that Parliament, and interestingly, Parliament is an institution which guarantees Māori representation through the Māori seats. It's disappointing to me that that institution is being used by the current coalition government to undermine Māori representation in local governments, to undermine local government's authority, to sow division in communities, and to weaken the very foundations that this country is built on. I find that absolutely abhorrent. The second point that I wanted to make, Mr. Mayor and colleagues, is that Māori representation, as provided by a Māori ward, is absolutely part of realizing the rights, the privileges, and the responsibilities embedded in our nation's foundations. Locally, they were established through our most recent consultative processes, has just been highlighted by Councillor Bowen, which has served to good effect to bring us to a positive situation that we have now, where that representation is provided here. And I would say that locally, in this chamber and in the wider community, we're realizing a number of benefits of that. And as such, Māori wards continue to have my full support and would ask everyone to be voting in support of this. We should not be pulling the rug out from under the rangatane in this way. It would be most disappointing if we ended up in that place. So please, please vote in support of this notice of motion. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tēnā tātou i te whare. E tua ngā hau e muia koutou katoa, I stand before you with a humble heart for my colleagues. And I say all my colleagues, those that are supportive of this very generous motion, and to my colleagues that have differing views. Because as has been shared with the chamber today, my whanaunga, Deputy Marshal Lob and I are on this journey, walking alongside each and every one of you, and it's a privilege we carry and bear on behalf of our wider Māori community, for better or for worse, for right or for wrong. Both Deputy Marshal Lobb, Deputy Mayor and I have made the decision to get involved, to participate, to take the hits, to celebrate the wins, and not only alongside our colleagues, but also our wider community, some of who are in the chamber today. And I acknowledge all of them as well. I could stand for a long time debating the rights and wrongs of this very, as my colleague Councillor Wood said, awkward conversation. To me, it's not awkward at all. Is it sad? Yes. Is it difficult at times? Yes. Is that okay? Of course it is. So I just want to stand and say on behalf of the wider Māori community, to each and every one of my colleagues who firstly have supported us, but to those who have brought differing opinions, thank you on behalf of all of us. Kia ora tata.
Thank you, Councillor. Kia ora. Look, I'll be absolutely supporting this, and I think if you look back on Te Papiaoia or Palmerston North's history, 150 years, the city and Rangitane have had a relationship which has been hugely rewarding. And manakitanga has been at its core. If you go back to Snelson, to Piti, that's where it all started. And Councillor Johnson is right, we have been a leader. And I know for a fact that when the poll was put to us, it took another organisation to come into town on their white horses and try and whip up the storm. They only got it through by a couple of votes, as some may know, because they had to have about 4 recounts to ensure that they had the 5%. That was somewhat disappointing because it would have continued the great story of Palmerston North pushing back or being a little bit different in what was mainstream New Zealand at the time. If you look at the advancement we've made in all things cultural here in Palmerston North, I think it's been hugely rewarding. You know, we have an iwi festival that welcomes everybody, and I'm thankful for that. We have a square or a public space which has a unique name in Te Raiahine and the meaning behind that, the Courtyard of Daughter of Peace. We have a statue of an Indigenous leader that was erected in 1906. I don't know any other place in New Zealand that has that. There may be, but very unique in New Zealand and in colonial New Zealand of the time. And currently the Māori wards are working extremely well. Stepping it back really is quite a backward step. And I'll be reaching out personally to the Prime Minister because I do think this is a fight he does not need. And I'm pretty sure he doesn't personally support it either, but he's got some coalition partners pushing this agenda. I think, put simply, Māori wards and our relationship or partnership document that we absolutely stand behind with Rangitane o Manawatu has been, again, I just use the word rewarding. It has been so rewarding. And I think that's for all Palmerstonians, not just some that may enjoy it, but I think for everybody. So it's been rewarding culturally, it's been rewarding socially, it's been rewarding in an environmental sense as well. And it has been rewarding economically as well. So please, councillors, support this notice of motion. Don't let central government or party politics come into this, because I think you've got to do what's best for Palmerston North and its people. So Māori representation is key to that, so please support it. Thank you. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm also very pleased to support this notice of motion, and I think it is important that we reflect a strong front in the vote for this. Going back when it was raised in a suggested that Rangitane would come to council and ask us to take this approach, I thought it was very important that we take our own lead for our community. And so I'm pleased that Councillor Zebabellin and Councillor Hancock have promoted the notice of motion. I think it's very, very timely for us to take a lead for our community and actually for our nation, because we want a better New Zealand. And I think this is counterproductive and disingenuous to actually remove it now after only having half a term down this pathway. What people want is fair representation that they can relate to and have confidence in. And straight out of local government, this is some quotes. Local democracy must be seen to be open, transparent, and fair for people to have trust in the democratic institution. Otherwise, citizens won't engage with local government or build civic values. When people make decisions about whether to vote, for example, trust and belief that the electoral processes are fair are critical factors. I just think it's fair. We talked about it's not fair for a person on the electoral roll that identifies they want to be on the Māori electoral roll only gets to vote for 2 members when the balance of the general roll gets to vote for the balance 13. That does seem unfair. But let's play that out. When the city used to have wards just under a general roll, I also thought it was unfair that Papaioea got to vote for 4 members and the other quadrants in the city got to vote for 3, and lo and behold, Ashes Fitzservice only got to vote for 2. How is that fair? It's the same example and same argument you're using on the Māori roll, but at least with the Māori roll, there's some choice around that. So I'm open to having a review. You know, what the conversation should be about is around whether people that are on either role get to vote for everybody. You know, that would be a more practical or, you know, beneficial conversation to have, not to have this imposed with the 5% threshold, which I think's, you know, arguably, where's the 5% come in? That's been covered already. And so, yeah, I really support the other speakers that have spoken around this being fundamentally unfair, what's been proposed by the current coalition. Yeah, my view would be, you know, that's not going to make a better New Zealand ultimately. So I'm going to support this and happy to speak to it in any other forum. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Michelard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just thought that I'll also add my voice to the debate. And speak in support of this notice of motion to endorse that the current representative structure remains the same. In the perfect world, I don't think we'll need Māori wards, but let's acknowledge the world isn't perfect. And I've enjoyed working alongside Rolly, Councillor Fitzgerald, and Councillor or Deputy Mayor Debbie Marshall, Log, because of not only the mana or the tikanga that they've brought, but also they've brought a valued sort of worldview or perspective to a lot of our council decision making and also processes. And personally, I don't see anything wrong with Māori wards. I think having Māori wards actually ensures that people who haven't been well represented or who've been underserved by the system can have a voice at the table. The same way probably different groups in our communities can be served or represented, but let's be honest, Māori are mana whenua. In as much as I'm here, I'm representing the whole of Palmerston North, and yes, it's true, I'm an immigrant who also speaks on behalf of migrants and refugees, but I have to acknowledge that I don't deserve to have a Māori ward because I also hear a lot of these arguments saying that, well, why don't we have awards for migrants or and the likes? And these are some of the arguments that are being thrown around sometimes. But Māori are mana whenua, they're tangata whenua. And it's only right that they have a voice at the table and that we consider issues that are important to them, be it on water issues, infrastructure, on any other issues that are considered important to them. And I think they add good value to council decision-making and processes. It boosts our diversity. Let's look at our council table, for example. And why, actually, I mean, I don't understand why, you know, central government just want to revert this, in as much as we don't want to speak about central government, but at the same time, you know, this is a central government decision that needs to be addressed here as well. And part of what we're doing here is trying to engage with the select committee process in order to improve the quality of the bill and that sort of thing. So Māori wards boost our diversity, and people can only participate or be part of an institution that they see themselves being represented in. And also, it honors the Treaty of Waitangi, Te Tiriti. I just understand. Yeah, I mean, we talk about the principles of the treaty. We talk about, you know, having a working knowledge of the treaty. And here we are not presenting a front, a united front in supporting this. I'm in favor of this, in as much as, others might have different views. And also, Māori was also fostered the development of Māori capacity to contribute in the decision making. Us reverting back to, the figures said here that, before this legislation came through, there were only 3 Māori wards, councils that had Māori wards, and this has increased to 45. It's a huge increase. Us reverting, to what we were is a step back in the past, and does not do any good in terms of a partnership with Māori or Rangitane and that sort of thing. So to allow 5% of the population to change, the course of action like it happened in 2018 is absurd. That's what we call the tyranny of the majority. 10% of the voting population are Māori, meaning that 90% are not Māori. That's the tyranny of the majority, speaking and making decisions on behalf of the few who are underheard, underserved, and undervalued. So for that reason, I'll be supporting this notice of motion and doing everything that I can to ensure that we put a good and quality submission that will fit into making the bill a lot better than it currently is. So on that note, I will end here. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question before I speak. Will we have the opportunity to ask the officers questions regarding the officers' report after this?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, for the kōrero. This is personal for me because it matters to my mokopuna and it matters to the sort of country that they grow up in. In the earlier item, I talked about safety being paramount. A New Zealand with protected Māori wood seats around council tables is a safer New Zealand for my mokopuna to grow up in. And it's a safer community for our children to grow up in. And it's fundamentally, I agree with most things that most people have said, but for me, that's what it comes down to. I'll be 100% supporting this notice of motion, and thanks for those who have put it forward for those reasons. The second thing I want to briefly comment on, which I do want to seek some further advice from our officers as following this discussion, is the requirements, the ongoing requirements that are imposed on us by Wellington, who are telling us what is best for our community, what they think might be best for our community. I appreciate the officer's report and what's been outlined as the financial and the non-financial impact of this potential decision. I think that it's time for us to start pushing back, and for me, that means how we advocate in Wellington, but it also means, for me, I would really like us to explore what it might look like for us to refuse to comply with that legislation. I don't know what that looks like, and I'm certainly, I'll ask those questions shortly. But I think that is something, not only with this matter, but other matters that have been imposed on us that cost our community a lot more than what I think they can afford, financially and non-financially. I think we need to actually start to consider whether that's an option open to us.
Deputy Mayor.
Tēnā tātou I hui manei. Just get myself sorted. Katie, Pete, Kanui te au. It's hard not to be emotional. As a Māori, I have felt beaten down this year. There have been so many things that Māori have had to tolerate, but we don't really tolerate it. It's just one hit after another. And Mr. Councillor Hancock, he outlined those, and they are really hurtful, and they do take us back If you've never been in a minority, you don't understand. And you can't understand if you haven't been in our shoes. Tēnā koe Rowley. E te tūngane. I'm not the only one crying. But Rowley and I have been humbled and privileged to work with you all, to work with each of you. I do think Palmerston North has a progressive and supportive and wonderful council, and I think everyone sitting around the table are here for the right reasons. I do want to say that I was thrilled to see this come forward, and also the fact that we are leaning into those discussions that are awkward for some. I don't find them awkward. I find this emotional, but not necessarily awkward. And I do think that we need to be transparent in talking about this. So to all my colleagues, and for what you've said, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. It's not just today, but we've had that, Rowley and I have had that tautoko since we came in. So tēnā koutou. Now, I pulled up something that I said on the 23rd of April last year, and I just want to read it because I think it does resonate and have something to do with this. As a council, we must serve the needs of all our community. Cultural diversity enriches our community. Māori as tangata whenua have a distinct place within Aotearoa, New Zealand, as accorded by Te Tiriti o Waitangi. Thank you, whoever gave me the tissues. Te Tiriti refers to the coexistence of two distinct cultures in partnership, Māori, Indigenous, and non-Māori. First, we must examine how we honour our partnership and responsibilities under Te Tiriti. We must also consider how we support other ethnic groups and what we need to do to embrace equity. Equity means that we give people the things they need to succeed. What we need to do is embrace equity. Equality creates an illusion that everyone is treated the same. However, this doesn't account for the systems and structures that have been designed to advantage one group over another group, and not another group. And in some cases, the suppression of Indigenous rights, mana whenua. I thank Councillor Johnson and Councillor Dennison for raising the notion of looking at this through a fairness lens. And I looked up at our crest. As you all know, I've not long come back from being in China. And when I wore the chains, the deputy mayoral chains, it was amazing because then people would come up close and have a look. And then they would say, who is that person on the side? What are those two? We can see a lady and we can see a man. Who is that man? What is he? And I said, well, that's a symbol of the Māori people, the mana whenua, and the Indigenous people of Aotearoa, and that is representative, the female character of the settlers who came and the people who came and settled and lived amongst us and a part of our wider whānau. And they said, how fantastic. And I said, yes, it is pretty fantastic. And in Palmerston North, where I come from, in our city, we have a fantastic relationship with mana whenua, tangata whenua, long before, and the Mayor is right, long before this day and age, or even this century. And that's a piece of our heritage that we nurture, we respect, and that continues. So, you know, I want to thank you all for what you've done. I am on the Māori roll and always have been because I wanted to have a voice and a say of who got to represent us. Because if I didn't, then I wouldn't be guaranteed of having that voice. And hence the reason why I'm doing that. I want to make sure, I believe only Māori can talk about Māori. Only Māori can sort of put a Māori perspective across. But in saying that, As a Māori, I'm grateful for the support of my colleagues. We live in enlightened times. I acknowledge all of you for your support and your acknowledgement of that. Nō reira, tēnā koutou.
Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just thought I'd better stand and not leave Councillor Wood out on his own. Last time we had this debate on whether we have a Māori ward or not, I voted against. And I'm not sure where I stand right now. I'm standing to try and figure it out myself. I've heard really good argument. But I always stood on a principle that I worked in a Māori tertiary provider for over 18 years. And I always, 90% of my students were Māori. And we always worked on the principle that you don't have to be given nothing. They can go out and work and earn and do exactly the same. They can stand for themselves. And it's a principle I hold really strong to, and in my whole teachings. Today I see a totally different argument that those that put forward. The Mayor mentions about relationships that have been built. Before Māori wards, we were building those relationships and they were being built strong. We have a committee, Te Rangitāne o Manawatu. We've done things in this council to support. We always have. And let's face it, the relationship that's been built with both Rowley and the Deputy Mayor, Debbie. You tell me whether you think either of these two people, if they were to stand for election tomorrow, would not get on this council. I believe they would. And I still struggle with my principle of being able to stand free and be granted a seat by the vote of all people. I'm a believer in all being one, and I understand what's been said here today and the different views, and that's why I'm torn, and I'm probably just burbling a bit now, trying to find my way. But really need both Councillor Fitzgerald and Deputy Mayor to understand that whichever way anybody votes today is not a reflection on either of you. Thank you.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Well, I came in here and I was very open to what was going to be said and I was going to vote against it. A couple of councillors who spoke basically confirmed that I cannot support this in any way, shape or form. Because some of the things that they said I thought was offensive. And up until about 5 minutes ago, I was definitely going to vote against it. But after hearing Debbie, and her heart was opened up the way she did, I will support this vote. Because I think the most pointed thing I've heard today was Debbie speaking from a Maori's perspective about how Maori should represent Maori. Didn't come out from anyone else, but from Debbie it definitely came. So Debbie, you've convinced me to vote for it. Thank you.
Councillor Harper online.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I wasn't going to speak, but I think I probably should. I have really, listening to the Deputy Mayor and to Councillor Fitzgerald has been really good. So I do appreciate both of them speaking today. I had every intention of voting against it. And my reason for voting against it was I was approached several times last week by different people saying to me that I had to think about voting against Māori wards. And one of them was an elderly Māori woman who said to me, Māori have to try and get to that table by themselves. They can't get there, which is pretty much the same as what Councillor Meehan was saying, that they have to try and get there by themselves. And she was she was in her 60s, and she said, it's just not fair that they get there through the Māori ward system. So that's why was my rationale for doing it. It wasn't based on anything political. So I don't want anyone to think that it's based on political. It's more about listening to people in the community. So that's what my rationale is, and I don't want people to think that I'm not speaking up. I'm speaking up for that reason, but I do really appreciate the work that the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Fitzgerald have done. This isn't a personal matter, it's more about speaking to people in the community about what their views are as well. Thank you.
Do you want to write a reply? Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Oh, you do? Oh, sorry, I thought you said no. Okay, Councillor Bellin.
Thank you. Yes, for right of reply, I just want to thank you for all your comments and to acknowledge everyone who has showed up today to show what this kaupapa means to you. I think all that remains to be said is that this notice of motion endorses the current structure and its benefits. So do ask of all opponents what material harm comes from retaining these seats. A trade-off? The entire Māori historic and present experience in the New Zealand political structure has been a series of trade-offs. It's not new. That's how incremental gains have been made. Abolishing wards isn't a trade-off, that's a hit, to reference the Deputy Mayor's terminology. Councillor Bowen is correct. The power of choice as to which electoral role you sit on still sits with the individual. Now, I myself faced that same question, and I was not able to vote for myself in the last election because I sat on the Māori role. So that's posed an interesting personal question for me. But wards are new to this council, and maybe there are ways that we can work through those restrictions in the future, but we can't do that if there are no wards, because that's it. It has been mentioned that we are national leaders in this space, and Councillor Naylor, I am certainly keen to explore non-compliance. I worked in the treaty sector for a number of years, and what we have here is what iwi and other parts of the motu are crying out for, and were crying out for a decade ago, and we are living it and walking that talk here, and I'm so proud of that. And I'm proud of the mana with which your support for this notice of motion will give to our submission to the Select Committee, which will, I'm sure, be presented by our Mayor and our Deputy Mayor, who is herself a Māori ward councillor. Because with the wards, the door is open and the benefits are flowing both ways. And if that door is shut, history shows us what happens and what will happen. So ngā mihi kia koutou, ngā mihi kia rangitāne, ngā mihi ki te iwi Māori, ngā mihi ki ngā tangata katoa o Aotearoa. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have the recommendations there that Council resolves to formally endorse its current representation structure of Tihara Waianui General Ward and Te Poho Māori Ward, and that a submission reflecting this position be made to the Select Committee process. I'm happy to move that. Sorry. You are moving it, and seconded by Councillor Hancock. My apologies. So we have that, and we've had the right of reply, so it was Councillor Hancock. We will vote. And it is passed 10 votes for and 1 against. So we had some questions of officer advice, so I'll just ask Hannah to quickly run round to the other side. And do you want to say anything initially to your... No, take it as being read. Councillor Naylor.
Thanks, Hannah. The question I have relates to section 3 of the officer's report, the potential impact of changes, and particularly it outlines the financial and the non-financial impact or consequences if that legislation progresses. My question is if council resolves to a course of action that's not in line with that legislation, what would be the consequence of that?
Thank you, Councillor Naylor, through you, Mr Mayor. I am going to throw the talking stick over to the Chief Executive, but before I do that, I suppose before, as a background to your question, it's framed as if the legislation progresses. So I think there are quite a few steps to get to before that point. So to speak you through that, what you have resolved so far today is that you endorse the current structure and you've directed officers to put a submission together. We'll go ahead and do that. When Select Committee opens for submission, we will submit that, and I understand that there'll be a full representation down to Wellington to present that submission. Then the Select Committee will report back and then Parliament will make its decision on the legislation. If the legislation progresses, then certainly we could bring something back through the chamber to act accordingly. But the resolution today has only asked us to go so far.
Yeah, I'm aware that the question that I'm asking is a little bit beyond just the scope of this paper, and the reason I ask it is that this is not the first potential thing that imposes costs that would require us to determine on behalf of our community something different perhaps than what we may decide as a council might be best for our community. Sorry, I'm moving into comment there, but whilst it's not, whilst I understand that there's some steps that need to still continue, I feel that it would be useful for us to have an understanding of the consequences of non-compliance with any government legislation for this matter or any other matter. Is that something we can find out perhaps in the future? Would we need to ask for a specific report on that? Or can
maybe rather than continue and comment, we'll let people answer the question.
Through the chair, obviously, if the legislation is passed, there is a decision point for council that's going to need to make in the not too distant future. If you chose not to follow any one of those particular recommendations, then effectively you're breaking the law. So that's the issue that we will have in front of us. What are the consequences of that? I don't know at this particular stage, but I suspect it might be tested across the country.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's the question is done. Thanks, Hannah. Okay, we'll see if we can get through. Right, we're going through to number 10. Oh, sorry, we have to receive the... Thank you for pointing that out. The officer response of Māori wards. Happy to move that. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Councillor Bowen, you're back again.
Mr. Mayor, I did want to comment because I think the Chief Executive has hit the nail on the head by saying that this will be a national issue. As I mentioned in my comments, I attended a workshop that the Department of Internal Affairs, who are responsible for this legislation and this process, ran, and a large part of the questioning from the very many of the 45 impacted councils who were represented in that hui was about consequences if we choose civil disobedience. I think there is a groundswell of opinion around the country that councils, to quote a political figure from the UK, are not for turning. We've set our course, we've walked in partnership, in good faith, and we are not for turning that around at this stage. And if we have to challenge the government on this matter, I think we should be prepared to do that because some things are big enough and important enough. And to me, this is one of them. So I think we say, we'll submit to your process, but that doesn't mean we have to like it, and it doesn't mean we have to line up behind it.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Just to reiterate, I guess, what was implied through my questioning, I'm absolutely interested in us exploring. I think civil disobedience sounds a bit nicer than illegal action, I guess, against the governments. So perhaps I'll go with that terminology, civil disobedience. I would be really interested in us exploring what that might look like. I'm very happy for us to hold on to the mandate that's given to us by our community when we're elected to make the decisions on behalf of our community that we believe are the most beneficial for our community. And if that means pushing back on the government, and if that even means exploring what it means to act illegally or civil disobedience, then I'm really interested in exploring what that might look like going forward.
All right. We will now vote, please. That has passed 16 votes for and none against. Thank you. Okay, through to 10, which is around nature calls. Just to give you an idea, councillors, I'm going to try and get through this one and then we'll break for lunch. It's around nature calls quality assurance framework, and ask Masuma back to the, and Mike Moynihan.
Just to confirm, Mr. Mayor, we are taking the terms of reference as well for nature calls? Oh, yes.
Yep.
I'll just start with a very, very quick intro in terms of the framework. It's what was requested by the former Finance and Audit Committee, and the reference at the time was something similar to what we had in place for the ozone replacement project. So, given the nature of this project and the length that it will go for years, wouldn't it? So this framework is only a starting point and it will be reviewed and revised as we progress through different phases of that project. But at this point, it is an indicative framework on what we will, the basis that we will start with, really. But yeah, I'll pass over to Mike.
Tēnā koutou, Mike Monahan. Talking about the terms of reference paper, councillors will recall that in November we brought a draft terms of reference for you to agree, and they were taken back to the steering group. The steering group met in December and then following in February to finalise the terms of reference to bring back for adoption, and that's what we're bringing today to council to consider. Thank you.
Happy to take any questions through you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. So are we asking questions on the terms of reference now as well as the, okay, I have questions on both. Apologies about the time. Now, just in terms of the project, the executive summary on page 44, it refers to an internal governance group, and it refers to the Nature Call steering group, and obviously there's also council. I'm just wanting to get clarity of who are the decision makers going forward regarding this project.
Ultimately, council would be a decision-making authority. Once the detailed project plan has been put in place and these structures have been established, there will be some delegated authority that different groups get, which is no different to any other project, but council remains a decision-maker.
And so what I'm not seeing in this framework, I'm just wondering if I'm missing it, but I see that it's to be reported to the Risk and Assurance Committee. in terms of the steering group, how is that information to be fed through to any potential decision-making for council?
So the steering group decisions will be reported via the quarterly report for the Nature Calls project.
Okay. Yep, and thank you. And so on page 49 in the design phase, under the financial section, there's the risk, this is under the risk, project risks. There's the cost impact, the nature calls exceeding council funding limit and resulting in financial strain on the project, and the land parcels exceeding costs, you know, those risks that have been identified. At what point, and also on the bottom of page 50, where it's got the risk of governance and reporting, the corrective actions are carried out too late. That's one of the risks. So considering those two risks, I guess what I'm really wanting to ask is, at what point would council determine a lack of obviously there's question marks around fundability, but at what point does council determine affordability for this project, given those risks that have been identified?
I wonder whether it's possible for a comment from the CIO or the CFO for that one.
We'll go to the CE first.
Yeah, through the chair, that's been done through the long-term plan currently at the moment. So as you're aware, we've set aside budgets accordingly, and there the project is looking to be financed through the infrastructure funding and financing legislation. So the risks that have been identified, the ones that you've identified around financing, have been dealt with through that decision-making through that part of the process.
So are you suggesting that if council decide that it's unaffordable for our community, that we should be deciding that when we listen to the long-term plan, when we deliberate on the long-term plan?
Yes.
And so that would be the time to make decisions around any sort of change to the process?
Well, that's the budget amounts are being put into the long-term plan.
Yeah.
That your decision-making process is through there. Bearing in mind that this project, the main costs associated with this project are in year 4, 5 and beyond, and that as well anyway. So the risks that are identified here are accurate. We're mitigating that through going through the long-term plan process and making sure that the budgets are available. There'll be backwards and forwards, I would imagine, during this period as we get more design detail about the actual costs associated with the project.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Masuma. Thanks, Mike. One question each, I think. Masuma, around the quality assurance framework, I'm just interested to know about the, I guess, quality and independence of review facilities that are available to us. It seems like there's quite a bit of reliance in that framework on review process. What do we know about the quality and the availability and the independence of review advice that may be provided to us?
In terms of the reviews that have been proposed in the framework, I guess what we will be doing is, as we move through the phases and as we scope each of those engagements, we would be looking to see the level of independence that we require. Is it sufficient that we just do it in-house, and is the scope something that we can deliver on in-house, or would we bring someone external in to do it, which will provide an extra layer of independence? At this point, it's quite hard to say what that will look like for each of those reviews. So I'm quite, does that help?
It does to an extent. I guess part of the question is how independent even the independents are, in that we're a pretty small country that has a pretty small expertise base around Three Waters. Broadly, there's some really big contractors that are already out there. So how do we get in, how does this framework provide for a high level of independence and scrutiny coming through review processes?
Very good question. I guess it's hard to answer right now because I don't know what the capacity or the resources available at the time will be when we do these, and how many conflicts of interest there will be and how many there will be that are completely independent. And one answer won't actually suffice all the reviews that are being proposed, I suppose, as well. In terms of, from an internal perspective, we can bring in quality assurance lead or independent advisors that are available on the project, and they are providing regular and consistent independence, and they can lead out some of these reviews, I suppose, as well, and that could be a control that we consider as well.
Thanks for those responses. Around the terms of reference, just wanted to inquire in terms of membership proposed there's a industry representatives to be confirmed slot in the membership, and just wanted to understand what industries are contemplated within that slot, how many, and what the thinking is.
Councillor, I've got an additional recommendation to come up on that.
Thank you. Is that around named entities within the list, or is that around the open part of it, talking about industry representatives to be confirmed?
It's dealing about the group you've spoken about, and also another group which is just above it.
Great, thank you. That's good. Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just in terms of the report on the terms of reference, so under purpose of the steering group, 3.1, there's only one purpose listed in the report, but in the actual terms of reference, there's 3 purposes listed. So is that just an omission, or?
So apologies if that's unclear, Councillor. In the actual report, all I reported on was the points that had changed from the original terms of reference.
I understand now. Thank you.
Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question on 6.4 in the report on the terms of reference, where it says invited guests can include technical experts or regulatory representatives as agenda items requires. Does that include or exclude elected members? Could other elected members be invited to attend?
Well, I don't suppose it excludes elected members, but that's just my opinion. It would be up to the group, I suppose, who they wish to invite along to those meetings for the purpose of that meeting.
So that's not an exhaustive list. It's just it could include those people.
I think the intention of 6.4 was if the particular steering group meeting was going to do a deep dive, say, into a report, we could bring the experts who wrote that report to the meeting to talk to that particular piece of the agenda.
So what would be the process if elected members did want to observe?
As the chair, I don't think there'd be any issues with elected members coming. It's quite technical at times. So Councillor Barrett's smiling because we deal with it. You'd be more than welcome to sit through it if you wanted to.
I rather feel like you're offering me a poisoned chalice there, Mr. Mayor, but I did just want to make sure and have it confirmed that elected members do have the option to, through the chair, to seek to be able to attend that if they want. And thank you for confirming
Absolutely. That. Councillor Naylor.
Oh, sorry, there was one further question related to the terms of reference. I see the changes that have been made to the confidential information and release of that. Am I correct in assuming that the confidential information that goes to that steering group is able to be made available to all elected members?
Yeah, that would be my understanding.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, councillors, we've got the two there, the 2 recommendations to council. I'll get my order right. I think I am moving these. That the council receive the memo titled Nature Calls Quality Assurance Framework and its attachment presented on 1 May 2024, and that council adopt the terms of reference for the Nature Calls Steering Group Attachment 1, and there's another one. Oh, okay. And removing the food and fibre and industry representatives from the membership. And look, I'm going to move that, so I have a seconder. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Now, the reasons for removing the food and fibre group, they've disbanded, and by their own admission, they aren't really. They already have, I suppose, a representation from Federated Farmers already, and the industry representatives. there are industry representatives there in terms of representation from the Chamber of Commerce, but also Fonterra Dairy Company as well. So there's more than enough people around the table in that respect. And it was questioned by some of our other steering group members why these people were on the list and never turned up. So we're just tidying that up, and that would be a view that was probably shared by almost everybody around the table. The group has met a couple of times, and we purposely put the terms of reference to our iwi partners to ensure that we were bringing everybody, everyone had inclusion in it. And I'd have to say it was a good process to go through, because they did add some really good points to it, and we've refined that now, and hence it's back to you as a council to endorse. So I hope you do support this, and there being no other questions, we will vote. Oh, sorry, Councillor, you went on the list. Councillor.
Apologies, I had forgotten to push my button. I do have a couple of comments to make about this framework and also the steering group terms of reference. I'm really supportive of this framework. I think it's really thorough. In particular, the risk part of this is going to be really key. And my questioning really, I think it's really important for us as the decision makers, as council, to really have an understanding of the risks and have a really good understanding of how those risks are going to be mitigated. Particularly the risk that's identified on page 50 at the very bottom there, in terms of the governance and reporting, the risk, one of the risks there is that risks are not mitigated and corrective actions are carried out too late. Now, the timing of any decision making around this project, I think, is really important. The risks already that have been identified in terms of the uncertainty of the fundability of this project, and also the uncertainty of the affordability of our project. I appreciate the Chief Executive's clarity and that that's something for us to consider through the long-term plan process. I am starting to wonder if 2 days deliberations is actually going to be enough for all the things that we need to consider through that process. However, I think it's really important, whilst we've got this framework and we've got a steering group and we've got internal governance groups, that we ensure that we understand that we are the decision makers in this. And if there are risks that need to be, and corrective actions that need to be carried out, we need to ensure that those corrective actions are not carried out too late. If we are to determine through the long-term plan process that this project in its current form is unaffordable for our community, and I suspect that may be something that we need to come to a collective view on, then I think it's better for the corrective actions to be sooner rather than later. I think that's all I'll say about that at the moment, but certainly I'll be pursuing that discussion following the long-term plan submissions, and it's my strong view, based on what I've heard so far and what I've seen so far in the office's information, that this may well be something that we need to revisit, because a BPO, it's not practicable if it's not fundable or affordable for our community. So I do suspect that we need to revisit the actual the plan that we had decided a few years ago, when it was determined to be not 647 million. I think the time is probably sooner rather than later that we need to revisit whether that is fit for purpose for going forward for our community. And just briefly, since we're taking this steering group terms of reference as well, my reservations, I'm happy to support it, but I do have some reservations around terms of steering groups, and that is, as I've already mentioned, that it can be easier when we determine, set out a steering group, that we leave it to them to decide. I think with this being the biggest project that this council needs to make decisions on, that we need to be sure that the relevant amount of information comes to this table for this council to be fully informed of the decisions it needs to make about this project going forward. So whilst I'm comfortable for that steering group terms of reference, What I did notice a lack of was any identifying sort of link to council and the decision-making that needs to happen as council. I would have preferred that to be very explicit within that terms of reference, and I didn't feel it was. But in saying that, I don't have a problem with the steering group continuing. I had asked at a previous meeting that those minutes be circulated, and I'm hoping to see that continue, as well as that information being made available to all of council. Thanks.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I didn't want to have Councillor Naylor the only one speaking on the concerns around the cost of the wastewater project, but also just wanted to re-emphasise and being a member of that working group and agreeing to those terms of reference. I give absolute confidence that understand that council has the total leadership in this project, has the total final decision-making capacity, and I won't relinquish that in any of those steps of the process with you. So giving confidence around that and making sure that is, we know that that's so important. But just in the reflection, waiting for the submissions to come through in the hearing process for our long-term planning, this project is clearly the biggest project that we're facing. It's one of the big rocks we've got to put into the budget somewhere, and to have this funded off the books type of funding mechanism, it does bring concerns. This is, we're going into uncharted territory. And so we talked about some of the civic resistance or whatever it was in the previous item. You know, this one here, I think we need to allow ourselves space and time to make sure we get this right. To be influenced by the consenting process after being delayed significantly through the reform that was flip-flopped. I just think that this pivotal time for Palmerston North, this is so unfair. When we're talking about fairness, this is so unfair that we have 2 or 3 years of flip-flop with reform and then end up in a budget that says the updated cost is 647 million or whatever. It's eye-watering. And so I just really want to lay the ground to make sure we give ourselves space and time to get through this well without burdening the city from this point onwards. So that'd be my voice in this item. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Look, I wasn't going to speak, but there's been some commentary made. Look, you're very welcome, councillors, to come to these meetings, as we've just alluded to. And Councillor Naylor, you can come to everything and listen to every single thing. So it's 4 years away that we need to do this work, which the CEO spoke about. We've got some budget lines in there. I absolutely believe that it'll be significantly less than 647. We can't afford that as a country if that's what it's going to be on this council. The rubber's starting to hit the road in terms of what we're testing the methodology of what the officers have put in front of us, bearing in mind there's huge contingencies involved in some of that planning. Huge contingencies, hundreds of millions of it. So we need to really understand what that looks like. This steering group is bringing our partners along with us. If we don't, we're in Environment Court on day one. So you've got to have a steering group. If you don't, line up at the door at the Environment Court along with iwi, industry, possibly residents. So look, the BPO process was very thorough, and it's given us I suppose, mandated evidence of where we're going. The cost, absolutely agree, that's all, it seems to have blown out significantly, and I'm using it as a budget line at this stage, and it's something that we're looking to get some partnership around as well. Some of you may have seen an interview I did with Radio New Zealand. I'd have to say that there was some of the commentary there that we've taken the gold-plated version. We haven't. We took a version that was consentable. And those that are around the table will know if we'd taken the cheapest option on the table, it was unconsentable. So I think we all need to acknowledge that. We can go on and on about affordability and costs, but actually, are you going to get this over the line? So we've still got some work to do in that space. So, and it's going to continue, and we are 4 years away. Yes, it's coming closer. Can we raise the finance? I just remind councillors that Crown Infrastructure Partners had approached us, not the other way around. So we are having ongoing discussions with them. So I'll say that publicly again, if we are questioned, and we've been questioned at times by the media, and those conversations are continuing. That's continuing with other partners as well, but we will definitely be bringing everything back from the steering group to this decision-making body. In no way is the steering group the decision-making body. It's always been this place, and I sort of get a little bit lost why we keep saying that. So it is this organisation, it is council. All right. Didn't probably need to say that, but I had to repeat it. We will vote. All right, that's passed 16 votes for. We will now adjourn the meeting till 3 p.m. We have 2 p.m. We have a hui with rangitane in the Missoula.